For 30 years, Blake stood alone, maintaining the barrier that protected the kingdom from the Demon King's army. When peace came, they called him outdated, useless, forgotten. But the hero he once saved knows the truth. This unfortunate old man has polished his barrier arts to the point of invincibility. Can the man mocked as worthless show the world that his magic is unmatched? Let's find out. This story begins with the hero being defeated by the Demon King. Cornered, humanity gathered 100 barrier mages to confront the Demon King and his army. These mages created a barrier that enclosed the demon realm. Years passed, many generations of heroes challenged the Demon King and kept losing. 30 years later, the protagonist, barrier mage Blake, 39 years old, got up from his bed with a yawn, then put on his clothes and walked out of the building. After taking a small bite of bread, he looked ahead and noticed that they were as cheerful as ever. There were many monsters behind the barrier. He placed his hand on the barrier, adding that it had weakened a little. He then knelt down and placed his hands on the ground, creating a huge magic symbol underneath himself, channeling energy directly into the barrier. He said that the barrier has been weakening faster and faster lately. The amount of magic needed to maintain it has also increased noticeably. He hopes that the new hero will be able to defeat the Demon King. Meanwhile, the battle was going on. The Demon King raised his hand to attack. Alice quickly ran to attack, holding her sword in front of her. She flew further than the Demon King, and he, holding his wounded chest with his hand, said, "Who would have thought that he would lose? This could not happen. He will not forgive. Damn her." With these words, he fell to the ground, and then Alice happily said, "They won. Time for a victory cry." At this moment, the protagonist looked forward in surprise and shouted in surprise, "This is it." He looked at the dead monsters behind him and said, "Has the Demon King been defeated?" He noticed that the dark aura was dissipating. He looked at the sky and said, "Amazing. They really defeated the Demon King. Both the dark aura and the monsters from the demonic realm are disappearing. Peace will finally come. Now everyone can live without worries." He closed his eyes and added, "For 30 years he maintained the barrier, allowing others to live in safety. Maybe he should get a reward too?" He hopes that he can taste something delicious. A month later, the protagonist was in a building. Several warriors approached him. One of them pointed his finger forward and said, "He is no longer needed." The protagonist pointed his finger at himself in surprise and asked, "What, not needed?" In response, the warrior shouted, "He is just wasting public funds to maintain a useless barrier. A swindler, squandering money." They began to drag him out of the house, and he asked in surprise, "What are they talking about? He was supposed to maintain the barrier. The barrier protected everyone from the dark aura and monsters from the demon realm." The knight put his hand to his ear and smirked. What? He heard it for the first time. What use could he possibly be? A pathetic barrier mage. He then pushed him in the back and shouted, "He should get out of here. Useless loser. This shack and the land around it belong to the kingdom." The protagonist then walked on, holding the things in his hands. He said desperately, he worked hard for 30 years. He didn't think it would end like this. He thought, perhaps he should return to the village where he was born. Sometime later, in front of the doors of the Adventurers Guild, the protagonist looked at the coins on the table and said, "The reward is somehow small, isn't it?" The worker was indignant. What? A simple barrier mage has no right to complain. MC closed his eyes and thought that this was not enough to live on. But he worked so much. Are barriers really useless? And the next day, even if the reward is small, he has no choice but to work for the guild. There is no other work for barrier mages. Then he approached the worker again and, putting his hands on the table in front of her, said he apologizes. She must give him some work. No matter how small the pay, he will do anything. She said that they have no work. No one wants to hire a barrier mage. At this moment, one of the people present chuckled. "Hey, there must be an easier task, like chopping down trees." His comrade added, "It's unlikely that he would be hired for anything else. After all, he is a useless barrier mage." With these words, they pointed a finger at him and began to laugh. The next second, there was a knock on the door. A voice was heard. He was asking for forgiveness. The knight went inside and shouted, "Is this the barrier mage named Blake?" The guild worker shouted in surprise. "The royal knights?" One of the guys present was surprised. "What are they doing in their hole?" His comrade added, "Did this useless man do something?" And then the protagonist raised his hand and said that he is the barrier mage Blake. The knight looked at him seriously, and then said, "By order of the hero Alice, they have come to escort him. Does he agree to go with them to the capital?" The guy shouted in surprise, "The hero is calling him? What kind of joke is this?" His comrade added, "This is a useless barrier mage. Why?" After that, the protagonist agreed and followed the knight, and he turned around and apologized for the suddenness. But they had to leave immediately. They went outside, and he pointed his hand at the carriage and said that he asked him to get in. The protagonist left the building, and then one of the guys, turning to the guild worker, asked, "Is this guy really a simple barrier mage?" She suggested that maybe they should apologize to him. He asked, "They won't be punished later, right?" And then MC set off. Closing his eyes, he thought, the carriage is quite comfortable, but he still feels out of place. He didn't think the hero would call him. Yes, he helped her once, but still, did she remember him? Sometime later, Miston, the capital of the kingdom of Hendria. The protagonist looked out the window and said in surprise, "Wow, this place is huge. There are so many people here. Then they walked along the corridor of the castle, and he thought that he did not fit in here. Then Alice came out to them and spreading her arms out to the sides happily said, "He's come! Mr. Blake, she's been waiting for him so much." The hero is Alice, 18 years old. She asked, does he remember her? He helped her a lot at the border of the demon realm. He answered, of course he remembers her. She happily asked, really? She's so happy. Then she bowed and thanked him for his help. She was separated from her companions and already thought that she was finished. He saved her life. He smiled awkwardly and scratched his head, saying that he didn't do anything special. He was just lucky to be there at the right time. She shook her hands and added, her companions also wanted to meet him, but it seems that they are busy with ceremonies and such, so they couldn't come. She apologizes for that. Then she clenched her fists and asked him, looking at him with admiration, what is he going to do now? After the Demon King died, maintaining the barrier is no longer necessary, right? He must be a celebrity in his city. In response, he laughed lightly and said that he didn't have any concrete plans yet. He thought that he was actually out of work. She asked, if that's the case, why doesn't he join the Royal Mage Corps? At this moment, the vice captain of the 5th Squad of the Royal Mage Corps, Gunther, 22 years old, looked at him indignantly and said, the Royal Mage Corps only accepts elites. There's no way a mere barrier mage can join it. You shouldn't confuse weaklings who can only put up barriers with real mages. Alice walked up to him and raised her index finger and retorted, hey, it was only because he maintained the barriers that the monsters and dark aura from the demon realm were unable to spread. He smiled and said that she was overestimating him, Mrs. Hero. The monsters didn't dare to attack because they were afraid of the battle mages. He put his hand on his chest and added, the barrier only stopped the dark aura, but it wasn't anything special and could easily be blocked by magic. In other words, the barrier mages were completely unnecessary. MC thought, so by all accounts, barrier mages are useless. 30 years ago they were still respected. He can't believe that their reputation has fallen so much over the years. He clenched his fist and thought that he had been working hard all this time. Gunther then smirked and added, besides, he is already an old man. People with abilities become great geniuses, not old slackers. Does he even have any skills? He is sure he doesn't. Alice asked, so he can join if he has skills, right? Gunther smiled and confirmed it. If he can defeat him, he can. She asked, that is, he must defeat the vice captain of the 5th Squad? He came closer to the protagonist and, looking at him with a grin, said, of course, he is not young anymore. He should not fight with newbies. Their potential has not yet been revealed. And if he does not have abilities here and now, then he is not interesting to them. Then, Alice came up to the protagonist and asked, what will he say, Mr. Blake? He tried to answer something uncertainly, and she looked into his eyes and said, Mr. Blake, she believes in him. After some time, they entered the arena and looked into each other's eyes. The protagonist thought, and how did it all turn out like this? He was simply summoned here. His opponent said, he is Gunther, the vice captain of the 5th Squad of the Royal Magician's Corps. He concentrated the fire energy in his hand and shouted, he shouldn't complain if he can't survive this. He then sent the fireball forward. A huge explosion occurred. The mages watching this shouted joyfully, it's already over, as expected of the vice captain. Gunther turned around and said with a smirk, this is what happens when a pathetic barrier mage starts acting like something. He laughed, and then turned around sharply and shouted indignantly, who dares to stop him from enjoying his victory? MC scratched the back of his head and asked, has this opening duel already started? The people present exclaimed in surprise. He survived the vice captain's blow, and he was not hurt at all. Gunther frowned as he looked at him and thought, no way, this should have burned him to ashes. What did he do? And then, he concentrated the energy in his hand again, and said that he wanted to go easy on him, but this time, he would be more serious. He must try to endure this. The next second, he sent the fire energy forward again, but the protagonist also put his hand in front of him, creating a barrier and defending himself from the attack. Gunther repeated the fire attack again and again. He said, he must receive more. He must turn to ashes. Weakling. At this moment, the mage put her hands to her chest and said anxiously, this is too much. No one can survive this. The fire grew more and more in the arena, and the protagonist, being behind the barrier, thought, something is wrong here. His magic is too weak. Maybe he is trying to hold back? Otherwise, it makes no sense. Then the arena was filled with smoke. Gunther said, he should be dead after this, right? He then looked forward in surprise, noticing the MC appearing from the smoke, and shouted in surprise, why is he still alive? He thought it was impossible. He was just a barrier mage. He then pointed his finger at him and smirked, shouting, after all he can do is set up barriers, but there's no point in defending if he can't hit back. If he's so confident, he should try attacking him. The protagonist put his hand forward and hesitantly said, oh well, if that's what it takes. Gunther was surprised. What was he mumbling about? The next second, a small barrier flew right into his face, throwing him back. He hit his head on the ground. The other mages shouted in surprise. The vice captain was knocked down? What happened? Gunther stood up and shouted, idiot, what did he do? Barrier mages don't have attack spells. The protagonist created a small barrier above himself and said that he simply moved the barrier. That's all. Gunther shouted indignantly, he shouldn't be trying to joke. Barriers are placed in one place. Moving it is unthinkable. This is simply ridiculous. The protagonist smiled and scratched the back of his head, saying that in the 30 years that he maintained the barrier, he somehow learned to control it. Then he looked to the side and asked, is there anything unusual about moving the barrier? The mages began to chatter. Hey, so this barrier mage surpassed the vice captain. He withstood his spell and did not receive a scratch. Is he really stronger? Hearing this, Gunther thought, how could he lose to some useless weakling? If this continues, he will be humiliated. He must defeat him. No, he must finish him off. Then he glanced at his subordinates out of the corner of his eye. They nodded and began to concentrate energy in their hands. The next second, a powerful fire appeared behind the protagonist, but he easily created a barrier behind himself, defending himself from the attack. He then turned around and was surprised. Did something hit him from behind? Did someone throw a rock? Gunther, angry, thought, the barrier was activated automatically. What is wrong with this man? What the hell is he? Alice, who was watching this, thought she allowed him to cheat once so that everyone could see his ability, but he will not get a second chance. Vice Captain Gunther. At this moment, he concentrated fire energy in his hands and thought, disgusting. Damn! He refuses to let it end like this. He concentrated a huge flame around himself and thought that he will attack him with everything he has. Otherwise, the Alice ladies will be disappointed in him. The concentration of fire was so powerful that the magicians present shouted, this is bad. He is going to use advanced magic. They can be affected too. Gunther shouted, he will burn him with his maximum power. He must die. With these words, he sent forward a huge stream of fire. The others, running in different directions, shouted, we need to run faster. Alice, smiling, folded her arms across her chest and thought, an ordinary barrier would not withstand such a blow. But if we are talking about the barrier set up by him, she remembered the events when MC used his barriers to attack the monsters that attacked her, and she thought, he definitely will not lose. The next second, the protagonist sent forward several small barriers, flying in different directions. Gunther, perplexed, shouted, what the hell? He knelt down and desperately said, this could not happen. His strongest magic did not work. The other mages were surprised. The vice captain's magic was dispelled. That is, the barrier mage won? Alice happily declared, the barrier mage Blake wins. He proved that he has enough ability to join the Royal Mage Corps. Gunther tried to object, but she added, and anyway, he had been maintaining the barrier that protected the rest of the world from the demon realm for 30 years. Wasn't that enough of an achievement? He shouted. It wasn't just his power. After all, there were other barrier mages. Right, what happened to the others? Where are the knights who investigated? They should call them. At that moment, a knight approached him, holding a document in his hand. He said, according to the investigation he conducted, there were no other barrier mages. Gunther was surprised. What, no one? He said, from the looks of it, the other barrier mages disappeared for various reasons. Some died of illness, some retired, some couldn't handle the strain and ran away. So at least recently, the barrier mage Blake was the only one maintaining the barrier that surrounded the demon realm. The protagonist looked at his hand and thought, I see. So that's why the amount of magic needed to maintain the barrier kept increasing. Gunther then shouted, stop lying. Does he even know how big the demon realm was? It was bigger than the Hendria kingdom. Is he seriously claiming that he could maintain a barrier of this size by himself? Alice smiled and thought, Mr. Blake, it seems he's even more amazing than she imagined. And then Lancelot, the captain of the first squad, came to the arena. He asked, what is all the noise here? Gunther looked at him in surprise. The others said in surprise, it is the captain of the first squad. It is the first time he sees him so close. Lancelot, the 29-year-old captain of the first squad of the Royal Magician Corps, asked, what is going on here? The vice captain of the 5th squad. He must explain himself. Alice approached him and, putting her hand on her waist, said that she recommended Blake to join the ranks of the Corps. But you see, Gunther was skeptical about his abilities. Lancelot asked and wanted to test it in a real fight. She confirmed it. Then he turned to Gunther and noticed that he had lost. He said he just went easy on him. It was stupid to use all his power against a mere barrier mage, right? Lancelot said, he's like a child. Stop making excuses. Gunther looked at him in anger. And the captain of the first squad added, regardless of status and background, as long as he has the ability, he can join, that's all. From today on, he is a member of the Royal Mage Corps. With that, he looked at the protagonist. The others were talking among themselves, but I can allow the barrier. He defeated the vice captain. Didn't he notice? MC clenched his fist and thought, he became a member of the Royal Mage Corps. The elite of the royal troops. Unbelievable. But will he succeed? He's only been maintaining the barrier for these 30 years, right? And then Alice came up to him and congratulated him with a smile. She believed in him. He was grateful to her and said that it was only thanks to her. She replied, there was no need to thank her. It was better to celebrate. Then Lancelot came up to her and said, there is no time for this, Mrs. Hero Alice. He said that they should get back to work. Then the mages took her by the arms and started to lead her away. She screamed that they should let her go. Lancelot looked at the protagonist and noticed that Mrs. Alice seemed to like him. What kind of relationship do they have? He replied, just a casual acquaintance. He said that many people are trying to get closer to the heroine. He hopes that he is not one of them. A few days later, the protagonist, looking at the map in his hands, said, so this is the barracks of the Royal Mage Corps. Walking inside, he looked around and thought, where is his room? At that moment, the girl asked, what is this old man doing here? Her partner said that she did not see him among the officers. He looked so, a peasant? The protagonist walked further and thought, terrible, I need to quickly find my room. Then he came to the door with the number 206 and said, this. He went inside and apologized. A new recruit of the Royal Mage Corps, 16-year-old Sven, looked at him. He asked in surprise who he was. He answered, he was glad to meet you. He was Blake? he would be his roommate. Sven asked, why such an old man? A few moments later, he shouted in surprise, what? So he was recommended by the hero Alice herself? And he beat Vice Captain Gunther at the entrance exam? Yes, a lie. That can't be. MC smiled awkwardly and thought, really, it sounds implausible, more like a fairy tale. Then he looked at his neighbor, who was shaking with anger, and asked, is he okay? Sven threw his hands behind his head and shouted, this is the end. His life is over. He ended up on a lying old man's team. The protagonist was surprised. On a team? He said that roommates always end up on the same team. The protagonist asked, is that so? He apologizes for this. He will try not to drag the team down. He replied that it was not his fault. Then he continued to look at him and asked, what is this mess with his hair? It will interfere with his training. Maybe he should trim it a little. After a while, Sven, smiling proudly, asked, how is it? The protagonist rubbed his neck and thanked him, and indeed, much better. Sven noticed it was almost time for training. Old man, he should quickly put on his uniform. After a while, a new recruit of the Royal Magician Corps, 16-year-old Therese, asked, so, who is this guy? Next to her, a new recruit of the Royal Magician Corps, 16-year-old Clara, stood. She said that she did not recognize him. Apparently, he was also on their team. MC smiled awkwardly and said that he was glad to meet you. His name is Blake. Therese pointed her finger at him and shouted in surprise. How did such an old man end up on the same team with them? Isn't it strange to include an old man in the team of new recruits? Clara, turning to her, said, she's going too far. In response, she shouted, she thought about it too. Clara, the protagonist, thought about it. And indeed, the rest of the team are very young, only he stands out from the squad. Then the instructor walked up to the podium and said that this was the new guy who had joined them today, Blake. He should introduce himself. The protagonist stood next to him and, introducing himself, said that he was glad to meet you. Among the mages, exclamations were heard. Is it true that he defeated the vice captain? Yes, this is simply impossible. There must be some kind of mistake. Clara thought, defeated the vice captain? Therese thought in surprise, this old man? No way. Sven grabbed his head and desperately thought, is he also a barrier mage? Yes, this is a complete finish. He is like a fish out of water. At this point, Gunther, angry, looked at the protagonist and thought that he should not think that all this will end well for him. Pathetic barrier mage. Then the instructor added, they are all still green rookies. Their future hasn't been decided yet, but the results of this training will decide which squad they will be assigned to. MC thought, I see. So he hasn't officially joined yet. Well, that means he will try his best. Then the instructor smiled and said, now they are in for survival training. They will have to hunt monsters in the mecha forest. Based on the results, they will receive an evaluation. The deadline is 2 weeks. One of the mages shouted in surprise, survival training? His teammate was surprised. It can't be. He hasn't even heard of such a thing. And the mecha forest too? This place is saturated with a dark aura. The instructor folded his arms across his chest and smiled, said, they are probably thinking how lucky they are. However, they should hurry up with their preparations. At that moment, Sven thought, this is the end. They shouldn't let newbies in this place. He then turned to the protagonist and asked him not to let them down. He replied that he understood. After that, the instructor said they should split into teams and get on the dragon carriages. They will take them to the starting points. Watching the carriage, Gunther smirked and thought he should prepare to know hell. Barrier mage. After a while, Sven shouted in surprise, what? What kind of place is this? He wondered why their starting point is in some mountains, where the forest is many miles away. Clara added, it doesn't look like there are other teams nearby. Therese looked at her and asked, did they draw the short straw? Sven grabbed his head and shouted, they are finished, definitely finished. His dream of joining the Corps will die with him. Therese pointed her finger at him and shouted at him to get ready. He is the team leader, right? So he could at least try to lead. He yelled back at her to shut up. He didn't sign up for this role. At that point, the protagonist raised his hand and apologized. They angrily yelled, what? He suggested that maybe they should look at the map first. He would like to figure out where they are. They looked at each other, and then Sven opened the map and said, here is the mecha forest, and they are probably around here somewhere. Clara, putting her fingers to her face, said, quite far, but she thought if they hurried, they could make it. But they would have to move really fast. MC adjusted the strap of his backpack and said, in that case, they had better get going soon, right? Sven noted that there was no other choice anyway. Therese sighed and suggested that they try. Then they set off. They passed through rocks and forests. Sven, stopping, said, these heavy backpacks are making things difficult. Therese added, they haven't reached Mecha Forest yet. Clara looked at the protagonist and thought, the old man hasn't even broken a sweat? Is he really used to such exertion? After a while, Therese looked up and said that she thought they were there. It was Mecha Forest. They stopped near the forest, from which a dark aura emanated. Sven noticed how much evil aura there was. Therese said, an ordinary person wouldn't last even a few seconds without resistance. Clara said, well, they are mages, so they should be able to handle it. Therese said, their target is Komodo dragons, monsters of the 2nd level, right? Sven looked at the map and confirmed it. Their nest is marked on the map. The protagonist asked, what does the level mean? Sven turned around and shouted in surprise. He really doesn't know. He raised his index finger and explained, monsters are divided into 10 levels depending on their strength. The 3rd level is already too strong. Beginners can't hope to defeat them. The protagonist smiled and said, I see. Now I understand more or less. He is grateful. He replied, it's nothing. After that, the girls went forward, and one of them asked, what are they whispering about? They have to go. Sven shouted, they shouldn't leave them. After a while, they continued on their way, when suddenly monsters appeared from behind the grass. The team, seeing them, shouted, Goblins. Sven concentrated energy in his hands and said, these are goblins, first-level monsters. He can handle them alone. Then he directed his attack at one of the monsters. The other two rushed towards him and he shouted, damn. The next second, Therese directed a magical slashing attack at them and told him not to relax. Got it, leader? He crouched down on the ground and, rubbing his hand, said, he could have handled it himself. Clara crouched down next to him and, releasing healing energy onto his hand, told him to just say that he was sorry. He looked at her and apologized, saying that he was really sorry. MC was standing nearby, watching the others. After that, Sven asked, damn, uncle, is he not going to help? Therese asked, didn't he say that he would kill them all by himself? He yelled at her to shut up. He did, but he already apologized for the mistake, right? Then they continued on their way. A dragonfly flew by, and the next second a carnivorous plant grabbed it with its bud. After that, the main character fell to the ground and sighed loudly. Sven asked, is he okay? What is he doing? He smiled awkwardly, scratched the back of his head and apologized, saying that he was really sorry. Then he put his hand on the ground, creating a magic symbol, and added, by the way, when he was falling, he noticed a path. Maybe they should go there. Sven said that he thought it was a good path. After that, Therese walked forward and, turning to Clara, told them to go. She agreed with her. They went forward. At that moment, MC dealt with a carnivorous plant behind them. Clara turned around in surprise. After some time, the protagonist pointed his finger forward and asked, do they hear the sound of water? After some time, they stopped near the river. Several monsters were watching them from behind the bushes. The protagonist asked, well, is it time to go further? After some time, they stopped for the night while the others were sleeping. The protagonist was sitting near the fire. At that moment, a huge monster crept up on him from behind. It opened its mouth wide, exposing its sharp teeth, but crashed into the barrier created by the protagonist. After that, it turned around and went back. Sven, waking up, said, it seems like he heard something. MC smiled and said, no, it seemed quiet. He understood and thought that they should change. The protagonist assured that he was still okay and he should rest. He would wake him up when his shift was over. He agreed with him and then thanked him. In response, the protagonist smiled. After a while, Sven, wiping the sweat from his face, said that they had hardly met any monsters, which was starting to scare him, even though he was already damn tired. Clara thought, so far they had only met weak monsters, and he, according to rumors, had defeated the vice captain. Maybe that guy was doing something? No, that couldn't be right? Then Therese asked, but that was good, right? She meant that they were tired from walking through the forest. If they had met strong monsters in this state, it would have been a problem. They just needed to hurry up and get to the Komodo dragons already. Meanwhile, Gunther folded his arms over his chest and thought with a grin, I wonder if the damn old man had died already? He had sent him to the worst place. Even if they reached the Mecha Forest, there would be many monsters on their way. And even if they defeated them and reached their destination, what was waiting for them there were not exactly Komodo dragons, not even exactly them. At that moment, Sven looked at the monster that appeared in front of him and shouted in surprise, it's a level 4 monster, a salamander. Therese turned around and shouted, it can burn down an entire village with one breath of flame. We have to run. After that, they realized that they were surrounded. There was another salamander standing behind them. Sven knelt down. His whole body trembled and desperately said, it's over. They can't defeat them. The girls holding hands trembled in fear. Then the salamander concentrated fire energy in its mouth and then directed it forward. Therese opened her eyes and asked in surprise, isn't it hot at all? The protagonist put his hand forward, creating a barrier, protecting them from the fire. Therese noticed in surprise. The barrier was blocking the flames. Clara asked, did Uncle do this? Then the salamander repeated the fire attack again. Sven shouted in fear, it's impossible. Even if the barrier protects them, they still can't escape. After that, MC came out of the barrier. Clara asked in surprise, Uncle? He turned around and said with a smile that he would come back. They should just wait here. Sven shouted, what do you mean he'll come back? Old man, he shouldn't go there. He extended his hand after him and said, old man, he's not going to make bait out of himself, right? He frowned and shouted, the barrier mage can't handle the salamander. Therese extended her hand to the barrier and said, his sacrifice shouldn't be in vain. As soon as the barrier disappears, they need to break through. Sven shouted, she wants to leave him here? She shouted that they have no chance against the salamander. And then Clara said, flame. They looked ahead in surprise and asked, what is this? What's going on? That's when the protagonist, pointing a small barrier at the monster, decapitated the salamander. After that, he came closer to the barrier. Sven shouted. The salamander was defeated in an instant. After that, MC heard a sound from behind. The salamander concentrated energy in its mouth and then sent a fire attack forward. The protagonist suddenly jumped up and then landed nearby and sent a small barrier as an attack again. After that, he concentrated the barrier wrapped around his fist. With it, he hit the monster's head, pressing it to the ground with such force that it was covered with cracks, and large pieces of stone flew in different directions. Then he adjusted the straps of his backpack and said, well, it's done. He thought, how nostalgic. He remembers killing many of these lizards in the sea of trees. They were called level 4 monsters, but maybe there were some weakened specimens. At this moment, Sven, perplexed, shouted, cool. Old man, he really is strong. Therese ran up to him and shouted, was that really barrier magic? How did he attack with that? Aren't barriers only used for defense? The protagonist scratched his cheek and thought, strong? Him? No, that was an exaggeration. He hunted sometimes. Yeah, but that was only part of the job of maintaining the barrier. Clara thought, to think a salamander could be defeated with barrier magic. and he used it not only for attack and defense, but also as a support when moving. Are barriers really that powerful? This man is definitely an unusual old man. Meanwhile, Gunther grinned and thought, this barrier mage should be dead by now. A difficult road through the mountains, many monsters, and here is the salamander's lair at the end. The next second, the instructor said, good job. Gunther, still smiling smugly, thought there was no way he could have returned alive. After that, the instructor said, Team F, they showed the best time and returned first. He thought in bewilderment. What? He grabbed his head and thought, how can he still be alive? And he came back first. He should calm down. They probably just ran away. They couldn't get the materials they needed for the task from the monsters. Then the instructor shouted in surprise. What the? Gunther turned around and thought, look, they see? The instructor took the obtained item in his hands and shouted happily. Who would have thought that they would come back with a salamander fang? This is the best result in history. Gunther thought in surprise. What? A salamander? They killed a salamander? Those losers in the barrier mage killed a salamander. The instructor smiled and said, Team F, great job. He will give them the points they deserve. They must continue to train hard in the future. Sven clenched his fist happily. Clara answered, good. After that, the instructor asked, but was there supposed to be a salamander lair on the beginner route? His partner replied that it wasn't so. They were scouting. The routes were set up to only encounter low-level monsters. Sven said happily, just think, they're in first place. Therese added, it was mostly thanks to Uncle. He defeated those salamanders and then led them out of the forest. Clara nodded and added, there was no way they could have done it on their own. Then Sven said, well, that's right. If you think about it, he did most of the work. MC countered, that's not true. They overcame all the obstacles because everyone tried their best. He just helped a little. Then Therese suggested that they agree on this. Sven put his hands behind his head and said, he's such a good guy. Clara thanked him. The protagonist thought, and yet they were in a worse position compared to the other teams. It can't be a coincidence. At that moment, Gunther clenched his teeth in anger, the veins on his face bulging. He thought, he won't tolerate this. A few days later, the instructor said that they would have training matches today. They should split into teams. Sven noticed that there were so many people here. Therese suggested moving to the second platform, where there was more space. Clara agreed with her. Then they went to the place, and Gunther watched them go, then smirked. After that, Sven approached the protagonist and said, now, old man, he must show him his abilities. In response, he asked him to go easy on him. After that, Gunther approached them and told them to wait. Since they were here, maybe he could conduct the training. Sven approached Therese and asked why Vice Captain Gunther wanted to take part in their training. She replied that she heard that he was helping, since there were not enough instructors. Gunther folded his arms and asked why they were standing there and whispering, they should take positions. The others agreed with him. After that, he looked at the protagonist and said that he was not participating. He just has to keep standing there like an idiot. Now let's start training. The next second, Therese was sent flying to the ground by a powerful blow. Clara ran up to her, started healing her, and called out to her in alarm. Gunther asked, hey, what's wrong? They have to try harder. If their opponent was a monster, they would be dead by now. Come on, they have to get up. They haven't finished training yet. And then he pointed his hand at the protagonist and said, and he was told to stand still and not move. He was currently training with the other three, or were they that weak? The protagonist frowned, and Gunther smirked, thinking, what an expression. This is exactly what he wanted to see. He has to stand there, unable to do anything. A pathetic barrier man. He then shouted, what are they waiting for? They have to attack. If they don't attack, then he will do it himself. With that, he concentrated energy in his hand, and then sent a powerful attack forward. After that, he clenched his fist and turned around and asked, what now? It looks like his buddies are in trouble. His hand shook slightly because of his action. He shouldn't get it wrong. This is just training. Everyone is alive. Well, maybe he went a bit overboard, and they could get burned. After that, he turned around and told him to look. The smoke is clearing. He should look at their pathetic burnt faces. The next second, the smoke cleared, revealing the kids behind the barrier. He shouted in surprise, what? Why are they unharmed? Sven looked at his hand in surprise and thought, if you look closely, you can see the barrier. Could it be an old man? Gunther thought, did the barrier mage do something? But he didn't see anything. Then one of the instructors said, the vice captain is fighting against Team F. His partner noticed that they looked battered. What's going on? Gunther spread his arms out to the sides and said that they were still in the middle of training, but they already seemed to be at their limit. Perhaps we should end it here. Sven shouted, this is not training. This is a beating. Therese added, how annoying. Now he is just going to leave. And then Clara said that she wants to win together with them. MC nodded, and Sven shouted, they can still fight. Therese said that they are asking to continue training. Clara said that they will not lose. The instructor shouted, they must continue. His partner added, they can do it. They cannot lose to the vice captain. Gunther thought, if he stops, he doesn't even know what rumors will be spread about him. After that, Clara, releasing healing energy at her comrades, shouted, forward. They join forces and win. Gunther, concentrating energy in his hands, shouted, they don't have the slightest chance. He then created an explosion in the center of the arena. Sven shouted, his magic won't reach them. He looked at the glow around their bodies and shouted in surprise, is that really a barrier? Cowards! Sven concentrated the energy in his hand and shouted, he doesn't want to hear this from him. Criminal. Then he and Therese aimed their magic attacks at him. Sven said, just like that. A great hit. Gunther shouted in rage, those little creatures. They can't think he'll leave it like that. They looked at him in fear, and then the protagonist stood in front of them, covering them with his hands. One of the instructors shouted, Enough. What is he doing? He put his hand out in front of him and said he was just conducting a training session. He replied, enough of these pathetic excuses. He pointed his finger at him and shouted, he's clearly against Blake. That's why he attacked Team F. They will investigate this, Vice Captain. In the meantime, he's losing his position. He should expect a demotion soon. He thought, why? Why is this happening to him? It's all his fault, Barrier Mage Blake. After a while, the protagonist's team gathered in a room. Sven said that he knew it was unfair with this Gunther. He really got scared during training. Therese added, it seems like he acted against them from the very beginning of practice. Sven folded his hands in front of him and asked, why didn't he like the old man? What a bastard. MC apologized for getting them into trouble because of him. Sven put his hands in front of him and said that it wasn't his fault, old man. Therese took a sip of tea and said that in a way it really was his. Sven looked at her and told her not to say that. Anyway, old man, why is he so strong? Therese said that he used the barrier in ways she had never seen. Clara added, so interesting. He hesitantly said, well, After that, Anna entered their room and said, in the name of Mrs. Edda, the Witch of Wisdom, she came to escort him to her, Mr. Blake. He pointed at himself and asked in surprise, huh? She grabbed his hand and leading him out of the room, told them to hurry. Therese asked, the witch Edda, is she one of the members of the hero's party? Sometime later, the kingdom of Hendria, the Institute for the Research of Magic. The Witch of Wisdom, the main researcher of magic, 13-year-old Edda, tore herself away from her book and, looking at the protagonist, noticed that they had not seen each other for a long time. Blake. He sat down opposite her and confirmed that they had not seen each other for a long time. She looks cheerful, as always. The next second, Anna put her hands on his shoulders and was indignant. What is he doing? Mrs. Edda is a genius of magic, born once in a generation. How dare he behave so rudely with her, as if she were a child? He apologized and asked if she didn't like it. She said it was fine. To the point, she called him for one reason. She needed his help in capturing monsters. It was very difficult to capture them alive. They easily broke physical shackles. Although monsters come in different types, they all emit a dark aura, so they can only be studied on sight. But this method also has many limitations. If they can capture the monsters and keep them here to study, they can learn more about their habits and characteristics, as well as analyze their aura. Maybe they can even find a way to coexist with them. The protagonist thought the hero's party is protected by the goddess's blessing, so the dark aura does not affect them. It is for this reason that only they could enter the demon realm, where the concentration of dark aura is extremely high. Then, Edda said that they would return to the topic. Blake, can he capture monsters above level 5 with his barriers? One of the mages said, Miss Edda, she overestimates barrier magic. Her partner added, he can't. Before she could finish speaking, the protagonist assured her that he could do it. She was surprised. What did he say? He thoughtfully replied that he could capture monsters above level 5. He thought, if those salamanders were really level 4, then level 5 would be no problem. Anna shouted indignantly. The fact that Mrs. Edda deigned to talk to him did not mean that he could lie about his abilities. No matter how good his barriers were, it was impossible. MC said that he didn't think there would be a problem with that. She waved her hand and shouted, stop lying. The next second, Edda said, Blake is coming with them. Not up for discussion. Anyone who continues to argue will regret it. After that, the mages bowed and asked for forgiveness. And Edda added, he didn't have to worry about the Royal Mage Corps. She would send them an official notice that participation in the research would be significant instead of training. In response, he smiled and thanked her. Anna thought, is this man taking advantage of some weakness of Miss Edda? So, they have to protect her. The next second, the protagonist hugged himself. His body began to tremble. He thought, what is this trembling? He has a bad feeling. After that, Edda announced, their destination is an abandoned mine in the city of Berberon. They are leaving. After a while, they set off, riding several dinosaurs. Edda, looking at the protagonist, said that she was so glad to see their savior again. Has he met the others yet? He replied, only Alice, she is full of cheerfulness. Edda laughed and said, she's always like this. Anna, looking at them, thought, but why is Miss Edda talking so friendly to this one? He is just a pathetic barrier mage. Edda then said, that time, if he had not saved them in the great forest of death, now they would all be dead. He thought that he was hunting on the demon side of the great forest. He accidentally ran into Alice. She was being attacked by monsters, so he helped her. At that time, he grabbed her by the shoulders and shouted, is she okay? She looked at him and asked him to save her friends. They should be somewhere nearby. He desperately searched the forest, and that's how he found Edda. She was surrounded by monsters. Edda said that the great forest of death plays with the feelings of everyone who enters it. That's why they were separated. She got lost and walked in circles. If he hadn't appeared and saved her, she would have died a terrible death. She can't thank him properly, Blake. He objected. He didn't do anything that deserved such praise. She laughed and noticed that he hadn't changed at all. After that, they turned their attention to the children running past. MC, smiling, told her to look at how much fun they were having. He had lived alone in the forest since he was 9, maintaining the barrier. So he's a little jealous of those kids. She said, I see. He's lived alone for so long. He asked, has she ever played like those kids? She replied that she was born with the potential to be a great mage. She'd never played with kids. Then she looked at the happy kids again. A few days later, an abandoned mine in the city of Berberon. The mage, putting her hand to her chest, noticed that there were far more dark auras there than expected. Even entering there was dangerous for everyone except Mrs. Edda. Edda asked, Blake, can he cover them with a barrier as they move? Anna objected. Mrs. Edda, there are no movable barriers. The protagonist replied that he could, and she shouted indignantly, He can't do anything. The next second, the protagonist created a barrier and walked forward. She shouted in surprise. He went. Going there is like signing a death contract. They'll see what's left of him. After that, MC returned and asked, "Are they going or what?" They shouted in surprise. He was alive. Etta smiled and turned to her subordinates, saying that as they could see, Blake's barriers were different from the usual ones. They had to go. The carts wouldn't go into the mine, so they would have to walk. After a while, they went inside, and Anna looked at her hand and asked, could it really protect them from such a thick, dark aura? Her partner said that she had never heard of movable barriers. She shook her head and folded her arms over her chest, saying of course it could protect them. It was a barrier after all, nothing special to praise. They continued on their way forward, and the protagonist looked around and noticed that there were no monsters nearby. Etta said it seemed like the aura was coming from the depths. He said that he believed that meant that the creature emitting the aura lived there. She said, but it could also be a curse or a natural phenomenon. Cursed objects created by humans, if left in a place for a long time, the most sinister of them can start to produce a dark aura. The dark aura spawns monsters, and their number increases. The monsters in turn release even more dark aura, spawning even more monsters. Eventually, if such a place is left unattended, a demon king can be born there. Etta added, oddly enough, if you kill a monster emitting a dark aura, all the monsters it spawned will also disappear. That's why half of the monsters in the demon realm disappeared after the king died. However, this does not mean that all the monsters in the world have disappeared. If they can figure out the reason for the dark aura and the monsters, they can deal with it. That's why the mission is so important. With that, she took a step forward and tripped over a stone lying in front of her. The protagonist managed to catch her from behind and asked if she was okay. She confirmed it and apologized. And then he said, it's dark here, so be careful. Well, or can he carry her on his back? Anna abruptly pushed him away from Etta and shouted, Carrie, you shouldn't treat Mrs. Etta like a child. She's a genius mage, a difficult person. After that, Etta walked forward and said, no need. She's grateful. They have to go. After a while, they came to the right place. MC said that the dark aura is even denser here. Etta said that she thinks they are there. The next second, a huge monster appeared from the dark aura, which opened its mouth wide and screamed loudly. The mages screamed in surprise. A minotaur, a level 5 monster. The protagonist said that he will grab it. Anna told him to stay behind. They will grab it themselves. Then they pointed several stones straight at the monster. The monster's eyes lit up with rage, and then it screamed loudly, throwing the stones in different directions. Anna screamed in fear. No way. It didn't even slow him down? Etta screamed, normal spells won't stop him. We need to rely on Blake, the barrier mage. Her subordinate screamed, Etta-sama, she can catch him, right? She looked at him in surprise, and then her subordinate knelt down and screamed. That's right. They have the genius witch Etta. She clenched her teeth and said, okay. After that, she turned to the monster. The others screamed, she's great, Etta-sama. She stopped next to the monster, holding her staff in front of her. After that, the monster leaned towards her and swung his huge axe, but MC managed to create a barrier right in front of her. The mages were surprised. What is this? A giant barrier? The protagonist pointed his hand forward, surrounding the monster with a barrier. One of the mages screamed in surprise. Where is he going? He shouldn't be in Etta-sama's way. At that moment, she shouted, maybe that's enough already? She came here with Blake so that he could help them capture the Minotaur. She objected, but the Minotaur would just break this barrier. Etta told them to just watch. The barrier holds the Minotaur and cuts off all the dark aura. The barrier is impenetrable, so the monster immediately weakened. Anna said that she had no idea that barriers could do that. Etta walked up to the barrier and, holding out her hand, thought, even a level 5 monster can't damage its barriers. It's so hard. Her spells can't do that. No, first of all, her. Then she turned around and said, the monster was captured thanks to Blake. They're coming back. After that, walking further, she thanked Blake for his help and asked, can he bring this monster for them? After that, she walked to the exit of the cave. The protagonist, looking after her, thought, Etta, is it really her? After a while, Etta said that everyone had done a great job. Now they could study the monsters to find out how to defeat them. They were standing next to a minotaur who was being held captive by a huge barrier. She came closer and knocked on the barrier and said that barriers were really convenient after all. To think that they could transport such huge monsters so easily. She then looked at the protagonist and asked how long he could maintain this barrier. He replied that as long as he was around, it would last practically forever. Well, the barrier would start to disappear after the power supply was turned off. She thoughtfully noted that this was a problem and then asked if there was anything they could do about it. Anna raised her hand and suggested that maybe it would be better to hold it with Miss Etta's magic now. The protagonist then took out a magic symbol from his inside pocket and said that everything would be fine if she used it. Anna asked what he had come up with. The protagonist then placed the magic symbol on the floor and Etta leaned over and asked what it was. He replied, a magic circle created to maintain the barriers in the demon realm in an active state. It can maintain the barrier in an active state for a while. She thought about it and then said, yes, there was something like that in the demon realm, but she had never heard of such a magic circle. Its creator is incredible. After that, the protagonist scratched his head and, laughing awkwardly, thanked her. She asked in surprise, was it really him who developed this? He confirmed it and said that he thought he was about 9 years old at the time. 30 years ago, when the dark aura of the demon realm invaded the continent, they, the barrier mages, gathered together. But they couldn't do anything. At first they just set up a barrier, but they couldn't move away from it. So he created a magic circle that can be poured with magic power. If you do that, the barrier will last for a while. During this time, you can rest, eat, etc. How, when there were 100 of them, they were able to create a barrier that covered the entire demon realm. But in the end, he was left alone. It was quite difficult and took a lot of strength. He was constantly exhausted. After that, he looked at the puzzled mages in surprise and asked, "Is something wrong?" Edda came closer and shouted, "This is an incredible achievement. Can you tell me more?" He smiled awkwardly, putting his hands forward and said, "There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, they will leave it for now. It's time to create a barrier." With that, he began to pour energy into the magic symbol. The energy went to the barrier. And then MC said that it should last for a few hours. He smiled and said that he will be there while they conduct research. Edda said, "Wow, this will help them a lot." She put her hand to her side and shouted, "They will begin research. We need to study the monsters and the dark aura emitted." The others agreed with her. After that, they began their research. Edda gave orders, conducted experiments, searched for information. At some point, Anna said, "Well," she asked to be excused. The protagonist, watching Edda, thought that everyone except her had gone home. After that, she said, she prepared a room for him in the lab. He can go there whenever he wants. He just needs to be here if he needs to infuse mana again. He asked, and she replied that she must conduct research as quickly as possible. This is to protect people who are afraid of monsters. He said that he would stay too. She, holding a test tube in her hand, said she already said there is no need for this. He smiled and said, no, he does not want to leave for long. What if the barrier weakens? After all, he is setting up such a thing outside the demon realm for the first time. She told him to do as he knows. He replied that he will do exactly that. A week later, Anna headed towards the exit again and said goodbye. The protagonist said that he would be leaving for a moment. He followed Anna into the corridor and asked if she had a minute. She was surprised. What was the matter? He said that he did not want to interfere in their relationship, but why did they leave Edda to work alone? She was indignant. What kind of questions? It was better for outsiders not to meddle in their affairs. He said that she always worked alone. Is there nothing they could do to help? She sighed and said, it seemed like he really did not understand. Mrs. Edda was a genius. They, ordinary people, could not help her in any way. Not only the power of magic, but also the ability to research. None of them could compare to her. Of course, they did their best during working hours, but staying longer would simply disturb her. She turned around and added, he had no reason to stay late either. He should go home. After that, she continued down the hallway. MC sighed and grabbed his head, then returned to the room and saw Edda, who had fallen asleep with her head on the book. After that, he covered her with his cape. A few more days later, Edda raised her hand and said, it's lunchtime. They should have a good rest. The mages, heading to the exit of the room, asked what they would like to eat. One of them suggested taking a steak. At that moment, Edda took out a small bread from her bag. The protagonist, leaning towards her, said that she is chained to the lab all the time. Edda, why doesn't she take a break too? She took a small piece of bread and said that she was resting in her room today. She apologizes for having to stay with her for so long. He replied that it is not so. He does what he wants. Then she looked at him and said, in any case, there is no need to worry about her. But he should have rested. He agreed with her. After some time, the mages occupied the dining room. One of the guys, smiling, said, after all, Mrs. Edda is amazing. Another mage added, so much determination and tenacity. She continues researching even alone. Yeah, they can't compare to her. They get in the way more. Another guy, smiling, said, her level is so high that he doesn't even understand what exactly they are doing. His partner added, and she can even catch monsters like a catfish. Their comrade added, yeah, that barrier man went crazy with her. Anna clenched her fist and said, it's worth entrusting everything to Mrs. Edda. She will do it in the best possible way. She is the treasure of the Hendria kingdom. As long as they follow her, a great future awaits them. At that moment, the MC who was passing by said that he didn't think that was the case. One of the mages stood up from his seat and was indignant. What did he say? What was he talking about? He replied that the fact that they kept praising her as a genius meant that they could just dump all the work on her. Adults shouldn't do that. She was a 13-year-old girl after all. Anna shouted, she said it already. Stop treating her like a child. She was the most talented mage in history. She was on a completely different level. The others agreed with her. That's right. She might look like a child, but she's an adult inside. He doesn't understand anything at all. The protagonist said, that's right. She has talent for magic and research, and her intelligence is as good as an adult's. But that doesn't mean she is like that. He saw the way she looked at the other children with envy, and he thought that at that moment like he said, Edda is a wise and kind child. That's why she acts the way adults want her to. Why are they so sure that she's an adult inside? Have any of them ever talked to her? Do any of them understand her feelings? Don't they want to help her? Anna put her hand to her chest and said, this. At that moment, her comrade grabbed her hand and turning around, said, it's time for them to go. At that moment, Edda entered the dining room, hunched over from fatigue. She walked forward. The protagonist extended his hand to her and said, what just happened? She silently walked on. He called her again. After some time, he was sitting on the edge of his bed. He heard a knock on the door and said that they could come in. Edda entered his room and asked if he had a minute. She sat on the edge of his bed while he brewed tea and offered her a hot drink. He held out a mug to her and said, "Here." In response, she apologized for that. He covered her with his cape again and smiling said it so that she wouldn't freeze. She thanked him again and then took a sip of hot tea and said, "It's so warm." After that, she looked at him and apologized for dragging him into all this. He replied that she should not worry. He decided to intervene himself. "Are they always like this?" She lowered her gaze and replied, "At first they were very motivated, but gradually everything changed. They praised her more and more, called her a genius witch, and at the same time they themselves did only the minimum of work. This always happens. She changes the people around her. She was born to ordinary peasants in a small village. There were no nobles or magicians around, and her family was the most ordinary. But she learned to speak very quickly. Soon she began to read books on magic that her parents could find, and then she herself used magic. Then, her parents exclaimed happily, 'Their baby is a genius.' From that day on, her parents sent her to a magic school. She absorbed spells like dry sand water, becoming an increasingly powerful magician. The inhabitants of her village praised her. Her talent is simply a miracle, a genius magician. Their village gave birth to a genius. Everyone called her a genius and expected her to live up to that title. They treated her like an adult because people thought geniuses matured faster. A mage's job was to research and fight, and of course she had to do that too. She was about 6 years old then, and she worked herself to the point of exhaustion. She had to live up to expectations because she was a genius, not a child. And so she did everything she could, but she clutched her dress with her hands and the protagonist asked, "She is afraid of monsters, right?" She was surprised and then looked at him and asked, "Did he notice?" He said, "And when he saved her, and recently, with the Minotaur, he saw how scared she was." She said, "I see." So he noticed. He is very observant. She is afraid to meet monsters face to face. When she was on the hero's team, she stayed in the rear, leaving the direct battle to others. And somehow they managed to fight, with her just there to support them. She trembled all over, and hugging herself with her arms, added that she was just terribly afraid of them. She couldn't help it. She would never be able to fight alone. The protagonist raised his hand and said that he understood. He was afraid of monsters too. She said that it was unlikely that it was the same for him. He replied that he simply fought, suppressing his fear. If he couldn't do it, he would die. So he continued to fight every day until he overcame his fear. She said that it was a pity that she couldn't do that. He smiled and said that she didn't have to. She could just be herself, Etta. She took his hand and shouted, but everyone expected so much from her. They believed in her genius and her strength. She grabbed her head and added that she had to try her best to live up to their expectations. She had to be strong and defeat monsters. If she couldn't, they would abandon her. She imagined the villagers saying that if their daughter wasn't a genius, then she was useless. They didn't want a talentless student. What? She wasn't a genius? She tricked them. They didn't want anything to do with an ordinary girl. She grabbed her head, her whole body shaking, and repeated, "They shouldn't abandon her. They shouldn't leave her. She would be a good girl. She would be a genius. She will be an adult. So please, they shouldn't abandon her." After that, the protagonist put his hand on her head and said that it was okay. He promised he would never abandon her. She looked at him, said, "Blake, He said it was hard, it hurt, and it felt terrible. But she tried hard. She looked at him with tears in her eyes and then hugged him around the neck. She said that she wanted to make friends and play with them, eat snacks, take a break from work. She wanted to have fun and spend time with her family. She likes exploring, but she hates fighting. It's scary and hard. She doesn't want to. Why can't she not do it? MC said, "They adults should spoil children and go easy on them." She said, "But everyone calls her a genius and expects her to act like one. She's a witch of wisdom and should act like one." He stroked her hair and said she doesn't have to try so hard. When it gets painful and hard and anyway, she can always come to him and he will spoil her. She asked, "Is that true?" He confirmed it. She asked, "Is he telling the truth?" He said, "Of course." They hugged again, and she happily said she was so happy. She thanked him and laid her head on his lap and then closed her eyes. He stroked her head and looked out the window and thought, just like then, he remembered how he attacked monsters with small barriers, and after a while, he put on his hood and went to the bed. Etta stretched out her trembling hand. He took it and stroked her hair in the present tense. She said, "Blake, he shouldn't go. He should stay with her. He shouldn't leave her alone." He said that he was here and wasn't going anywhere. A few days later on the shopping street, she asked him, "Has he been waiting for a long time?" "A few days ago." Etta went out to the mages and said, well, she was counting on them today too. The others told her to take care of them. After that, they got to work. The next day, the work continued, as did the day after, and the day after that. After a while, Etta closed the book in her hands, and then ran up to the protagonist and threw herself into his arms. She looked up at him and shouted that she didn't want to do this anymore. She was tired. She couldn't do it anymore. He stroked her head and, smiling, noticed that it had been hard for her. She smiled shyly and added, "More." He should pet her even harder. He agreed with her. He thought, Etta is under a lot of stress. It would be great if he could help her with something. Then he asked, "Can she take tomorrow off? Is there anything she wants to do?" She said yes. She wants to go for a walk with Blake. The next day they met on the shopping street. The protagonist came closer and, spreading his arms out to the side, smiled and said that everything is fine. he just arrived. So they will go? They began their walk, and after a few moments, Etta clenched her fists and happily said, "There are so many people here." He asked, "Is this her first time at the street market?" She answered, having arrived in the capital, she rarely goes outside, and in general, she has never been to cities. He put his hands on her waist, smiled, said that this is even better. She looked at him in surprise, and then he took her hand and asked if it wasn't more fun to do something for the first time. She happily agreed. After that, they went to a candy stand and took some lollipops, looking away, but they also saw children having fun. As the sunset approached, they continued to enjoy their walk, and then Etta turned her attention to the jewelry stand. MC, coming closer, asked if she liked anything. She looked at him in surprise, and then looked at the offered goods with embarrassment. After that, the protagonist took the jewelry in his hands and, turning to the employee, said, "This one, please." She wanted to object. She could pay for it herself. He turned to her and, smiling, said that everything was fine. He wanted to give her a gift. After that, he put some coins in the employee's hand, and she handed the jewelry to Etta and said, "Here, young lady." In response, she thanked her and, looking at the new decoration in her hands, happily said, "How wonderful." She is grateful. The protagonist said, "You are always welcome." The worker, giggling slightly, noted that she had a wonderful father and what a wonderful daughter he had. They awkwardly glanced at each other and then smiled at each other. A week later, Etta turned her gaze to the side. She stood in front of the mages and said that she was sorry that in the end they could not find out much about the dark aura. However, they were able to confirm the usefulness of barrier magic and that it completely crosses the effect of the dark aura. In the future, they will gather more mages into barriers and continue to research their magic. After that, she turned to the protagonist and asked, "Will he help them again, Blake?" He answered, "Of course." The next second, Anna stepped forward and, bowing, shouted, "They are very sorry." The other mages followed her example, and she added, "They felt inferior to Eda-sama, and so they began to depend on her for everything. They just made up an excuse for themselves, shifting all the work to her." Genius. And they themselves did not put in much effort. In addition, because of her envy of Blake-sama, she also behaved rudely towards him. They were just trying to protect their pride by looking down on the barrier mages. They apologize. She smiled and said that it was okay. She was not angry. The protagonist said that he felt the same way. Etta then put her hands on Anna's shoulders and, looking into her eyes, said, "But it will really be difficult for her if they shift all the work to her. So they must try harder." In response, she said, "Eda-sama, thank you very much." After that, the mages approached the protagonist, and one of them apologized. His partner added, "This incident opened his eyes to the power of barrier mages. Now he finally understood. Barrier magic is amazing." Then Etta, looking at Anna, asked, "But why did they suddenly want to apologize?" She said that it was all thanks to Mr. Blake. She lowered her gaze and added, "To tell the truth, they themselves noticed that she was not feeling well and felt guilty, but they could not gather the courage to say so. She thinks that they were afraid to face their helplessness." And then Mr. Blake scolded them. He helped her, and she even began to feel better. So they gathered their courage and approached her. "They are really amazing, Mr. Blake and his magic." She agreed. She also thought so, with all her heart. After a while, everyone was standing on the street. Etta looked into the eyes of the protagonist and said that she would contact him if anything. He replied that he would be waiting. After that, she motioned for him to bend over and whispered in his ear. Would he spoil her again? He smiled and answered whenever she wished. Then the mages waved after him, and the protagonist, turning around, thought it had been a long time since he had been in the core barracks. I wonder how they were doing? After a while, his team surrounded him. Therese shouted indignantly, "He had been gone too long." Sven pointed his finger at him and shouted, "He had made them worry." MC awkwardly put his hands in front of him and, smiling, said, "This." After a while, he was sitting on a chair. Sven sat on a chair in front of him and said, "It was hard to believe." Therese, who was sitting on the bed, added, "He really did catch a monster alive." Sven thought it was not easy to get into the Magic Research Institute, but still, Therese thought she could not believe that he was friends with someone else from the heroes group. Clara thought, maybe the barrier magic was strong after all? Who the hell is he? After that, the protagonist asked, "So what have they been doing while he was gone?" Sven smiled and said that he was hoping he would ask that. He pointed at himself and said, "Tomorrow they will show him the results of their training." After some time on the training ground, his team resolutely sent a magical attack forward, creating an explosion on the ground. They suddenly ran out of breath. Sven, resting his hands on his knees, breathing heavily, said, "Damn, he thought it would do better." Therese said, "Well, you can't become strong overnight." Then one of the magicians watching them said to look at these losers. His comrade added, "Sometimes there are such people." The guy next to them smirked. Did they seriously think that a few training sessions would make them the best? Sven clenched his teeth in irritation and said, "How annoying." Therese said, "Nothing can be done. She means that they really are weak." Clara agreed. They always rank at the bottom. He objected. "So what? They're suggesting that we surrender? Remain weaklings behind an old man's back?" Therese objected. She didn't say anything like that. After that, Sven turned around and said that he didn't want to. The hell with it. He'd surrender. Then he ran forward, and Therese, looking down, told him not to act like it was only him that was pissed off. Clara, looking at her, said, "Therese." After a while, MC, smiling awkwardly, scratched his cheek and asked, "What's wrong with him?" Sven fell to his knees in front of him and screamed. He's asking him to teach him. If he doesn't get stronger, he won't get into the core. The protagonist looked at him and asked, why does he want it so desperately? He replied, "He's the eldest son of a noble family from the outskirts of the country, and the only mage in the family, so they have high hopes for him. Although they are nobles, they are not rich, they have never lived in luxury, so he wants to earn money for his family." The protagonist said that he understands, but he only has a barrier. Sven noted that this is true, and the protagonist continued, "He can teach him how to fight." He exclaimed happily, "This is great, please, he must do it." The protagonist agreed and suggested starting tomorrow. Sven, starting to bow, said that he was counting on him. After a while, he indignantly shouted, "And what are they doing here?" The Rays winked at him and said that they can't let him steal the opportunity to become stronger. Clara noted that it was rude to ask Uncle about such a thing without them. MC, smiling, scratched the back of his head and said that it was he who invited them. He was sure that they felt the same as he did. Sven said, "No way," but only he crawled on his knees, begging him. Clara wondered, they can learn the secrets of Uncle's strength. She had seen him perform various tricks, but today they would be able to observe him up close. And then she turned around abruptly and thought that she would watch him without him noticing. After a while, the mecha forest, they were standing in front of several salamanders. Sven, having released a fire attack forward, shouted loudly and hit a monster. After that, he laughed slightly and told them to watch. He could do that too. The next second, another monster opened its mouth, heading towards him, but the protagonist easily sent several small barriers there, attacking the monster. Putting his hand on Sven's shoulder, he shouted, "You can't relax." In response, he apologized, and then the girls shouted, "Be careful, there are more of them." MC stood in front of them and, turning around, said, "First, he will show them an example. When there are many enemies against them, you need to use area of effect magic." He concentrated the energy in his hand, and then with one swing, defeated several monsters at once. He turned around and said something like that. The others stared at him with their mouths open. Sven said in surprise, "Cool." Therese screamed in surprise. "He finished them all off with one blow? No matter how you look at it, isn't he too strong?" And then Clara asked, "Uncle, why is he so strong?" Sven added, "He said that he did nothing but maintain the barrier." The protagonist smiled and said that it was an old and long story. After a while, they sat down on a fallen tree, and MC began his story. It all started 30 years ago. He was about 9 years old then. Because he had developed the talent of a barrier mage, he, like other such mages, was taken away by the borders of the demon realm. They were ordered to create a barrier that would stop demons and dark aura. They were given a small salary and some simple food. Basically, they were abandoned. Besides, their mission was to maintain the barrier around the demon realm, and he could not leave his place. There was no time even for sleep. The barrier was taking all his strength, but his food supplies were running out and he could no longer hold on. He was at his limit from fatigue and lack of sleep. And then he thought, why not create a magic circle that would automatically maintain the barrier? Clara noticed that very few people could create magic circles. Sven asked, did he fail so completely? The protagonist, scratching his head, answered that it was not so. He tried and he succeeded. He shouted, "This is not something that can be done so easily." The protagonist created a magic circle into which he could pour power, after which it maintained the barrier for a while. That day he slept like a log. A few days later, he gave all his money to a traveling merchant and asked him to travel around the rest of the mages, passing on to them the description of the magic circle. His next problems were food and shelter. He decided to go hunting in the nearby forests, but there were so many monsters there that he had to flee. He received some provisions once every couple of months, but even that stopped at some point. Driven by hunger, he entered the forest again. He was unable to obtain much. In addition, the dark aura in the forest was so thick that it needed to be purified. More importantly, his barrier magic did not work against monsters, and so he decided to become stronger. He trained and studied barrier magic to understand how it could be used. After hard training, he was able to strengthen the barrier. With this, it was now possible to hold off monsters for a while, and he was able to gather materials more freely. 3 years later, 12-year-old Blake. After several years of training, his barriers had become stronger. It was able to hold off monsters for several minutes. His magic power increased, and he felt that his body was also growing. But he was still not incapable of defeating monsters. His barriers were strong, but since it remained motionless, it was not suitable for attacking. He tried to make it move again and again, and his efforts bore fruit. After another 3 years, he could freely control his barriers. He called it attack-type barrier magic. The meat he tried for the first time in a long time was very tasty. Of course, before eating it, he cleaned it of the dark aura, and then he began to study the magic of the barrier even more diligently. The shape, the strength, the property, he had the ability to change their hardness and elasticity, and he began to create a combat technique based on the use of barriers. If they were to fight every day. Before he could finish speaking, the salamander behind him opened its mouth wide, concentrating a fire attack, but the protagonist quickly put up a barrier, protecting himself from the fire. The children looked at him in surprise, and then he pushed off the ground and, flying up to the monster, cut off its head with one swing. Then he turned around and said that they could do the same in time. The race noticed. He finished off the salamander again with one blow. Sven said, "He is too strong, old man." The protagonist looked at them in surprise, and then Sven added, "Now he understands how he became like this." Therese put her hand to her chest and said, "His story is amazing." Clara thought, it must have been very painful, but he doesn't show it. The uncle is really an amazing person. After that, the protagonist spread his arms out to the sides and said, "In any case, if they do the same as him, they will definitely become stronger. He is sure that soon they will all reach his level. Therese folded her arms on her chest and thought, ignorance scares him. Clara thought, the uncle doesn't understand anything. Sven clenched his fist, and looking at this, thought, he is not afraid. He can do it too. Then MC turned around and noticed they were just in time. They should fight against them. He pointed to the salamanders standing behind him and said that he was sure they could do it if they tried. The children looked at the monsters in fear and shouted, as if this is possible. After a while, the man smiled and said, no matter how you look at it, Captain Lancelot is incredible. The old man added, so strong that he became captain at such a young age. He said, he is so smart that he completes all the tasks perfectly. No wonder they call him the flawless Lancelot. In response, Lancelot sighed and said, come on, he does not deserve such titles. The man clenched his fists and said, and his modesty is also amazing. He should remain captain for the next term. After that, Lancelot looked ahead and said that they should not talk like that in front of high officials anymore. The guy said, but they also value him highly. He scratched the back of his head and noticed that they overestimated him. The guy objected. No need for extra modesty. Everyone relies on him, Captain. He thought that he did not deserve such praise because he was only slightly superior to them. Lately, his magic has stopped progressing, and he does not have great ambitions. The main task of the Royal Magic Corps is to maintain order. After the death of the Demon King, there were few strong enemies left. Peace is great, but he continues to worry about when he will finally be able to live up to the expectations placed on him. After a while, one of his subordinates handed him some documents and said, it seems like the border village is being attacked by monsters. Lancelot asked if he was not mistaken. The level of these monsters is low. They can use them for combat practice for the recruits. He looked at the documents in his hand and said, who should they send? After a while, Sven adjusted the straps of his backpack and said, not that. Therese told them to calm down. Clara said it would be easy. The protagonist, while packing his backpack, asked, are they okay? Maybe some water? Sven shouted indignantly, how can he be so calm? They were assigned along with the first squad. MC smiled and scratched his cheek, saying, there is nothing special about fighting monsters. He replied, he says scary things with such a calm look. But they went through the old man's training. Therese clenched her fist and said that they had definitely become much stronger. At that moment, one of the mages looked at them and told the others to look. The losers were shaking in fear. Sven turned around and shouted indignantly, was he laughing at him? After that, Lancelot ordered everyone to line up. He walked forward and said, they are marching towards the village. Witnesses said that a group of several dozen monsters no higher than level 3 attacked them. They should sort themselves into 4s and not forget about teamwork. The others shouted, yes, sir. One of his subordinates put his hand forward and shouted, they are moving. After that, they set off. After some time, Sven, breathing heavily, said that they had been walking for 6 hours already. Therese desperately asked when there would be a break. One of the other mages, breathing heavily, said that he was going to die now. He began to climb this hill. His legs were about to give way. After that, the mage shouted, a break in half an hour. Sven fell to the ground and sighing, said, finally. Clara also fell to the ground and said that she can't anymore. At that moment, one of the older mages approached them and indignantly shouted, what are they doing? Recruits must help their elders. After that, they began distributing food and water. Therese, handing a fruit to one of the mages, said that she thought they would finally get some rest. After that, the older mages began ordering them around. Hey, rookie, he must massage his shoulders. After some time, Sven looked through the telescope and asked, won't they even let them sleep? 7 days later, their journey continued. Sven thought, if this continues, they will die. They will definitely die. Therese thought that she can't do this anymore. Clara thought she wanted to sleep. Then the protagonist, holding the straps of his backpack, asked, are they okay? Are they sure they don't want some water? Sven shouted in surprise, why is he so cheerful? An old man? He looked away and said, a long time ago he also experienced something similar. Therese put her hand on Sven's shoulder and said, you shouldn't judge him by common sense. After that, he looked around and asked, by the way, where are the rest of the recruits? One of the older mages approached him and noticed that they had recently left. He put his hand on his shoulder and said, it's good that they are holding on. The rest had already scattered in the first days. So he is the same old man who received a recommendation from the group of heroes? They looked at the main character. His comrade added, middle-aged, and also a barrier mage. The man asked, what is so interesting about him? Sven shouted, the thing is, the old man is strong. Therese added, and they just don't understand anything. One of the indignant mages asked, what impudent ones? How do they talk to their elders? His comrade asked, should I teach them a lesson? At that moment, Lancelot came up to them and asked what they were doing. They turned to him and smiling awkwardly said, nothing. They were asking for forgiveness. Then Lancelot went up to the protagonist and told him not to cause trouble. He in turn asked for forgiveness and thanked him for intervening. As the captain walked on, he thought, you can't tell from him now that he beat Gunther. Is he hiding his strength? 2 weeks later, in one of the village houses, the village chief, sitting at the table, explained that the neighboring village was being attacked by monsters. All the villagers were afraid that they would be next. Tears were streaming down his face, place, and he said that he could show them where the monsters were. He asked them to deal with them before they came for them. After a while, the MC approached the rest of his team and said that he had returned. Sven, looking at him, apologized and said that it seemed that he was now leading their group. After that, the mage approached them and shouted, "Small group leaders, gather for a briefing." After a while, Lancelot said, "The village chief is relying on them. Some houses had already been burned down, and some girls had disappeared. It can be assumed that the monsters had already reached them." The guy clenched his fist and shouted, as expected of Mr. Lancelot. His comrade added, "Everything was cleared up so quickly." After that, the commander said, "Just in case they should not eat or drink for now. The monsters will probably show up later in the evening. He's going to ambush them. Any objections?" The others replied, "Of course not. They would never question Captain Lancelot's decisions." He replied, "I see then." At that moment, the protagonist said, "Could they please listen to his suggestion?" The indignant mages pointed at him and shouted, "He shouldn't be showing off. A rookie, questioning Captain Lancelot's plan? There must be limits to his impudence." And then, Lancelot put his hand on one of them's shoulder and told them to stop. He walked up to the protagonist and said, "It doesn't matter that he's a rookie. He wants to hear his opinion." The protagonist said that his proposed plan doesn't include rescuing the captured villagers. They need a team to handle that. The commander said that they don't know where they are. Is he going to find them before dark? The MC nodded and confirmed it. The man objected, but they won't have time to do that. His comrade added, "And you can't count on the neighboring peasants' help." The protagonist, smiling, said that he could find them using barrier search magic. The magician folded his arms and asked, "Barrier search magic? What's that?" MC concentrated several particles in his hand and, looking at it, said, "It allows him to find targets in a certain area. By transforming the barrier into small particles, he can determine the shape and movement of what they touch. Not only people and monsters, but also everything that has a physical form." They began to object. "Liar. Barrier magic creates barriers." He grabbed him by the cloak and shouted, "This one has no search abilities." At that moment, the protagonist closed his eyes and said, "There are two behind him. One is mocking. The other is drinking water." The man shouted in surprise, "How did he know?" His comrade added, "They are in cahoots with him." The next second, Lancelot said, "Accepted. His group will find the monsters and save the hostages." They shouted in surprise, "Captain?" He said that they will not affect the result here, so they will be more useful in the search, even if the chances are small. After that, he shouted, "They will begin the operation at sunset. Each squad will receive their orders." Sometime later, with the moon rising, the protagonist's team walked through the forest. Sven said that he could not believe that he trusted the recruits with such an important matter. Even Captain Lancelot has to make difficult decisions. Therese waved her hand and said that he misunderstood. He must have trusted them because it was not in the plan. Clara asked, "Uncle, he can find the monsters with his abilities, right?" He turned around and confirmed it, but the search area is limited, so he will have to walk. Sven noticed that he was, as always, strange, an old man. Therese smiled and said that she was no longer surprised. Clara looked at the protagonist and thought, he is amazing, and his magic too. When he is around, her heart beats so fast. After some time in the village, several monsters armed with knives entered the room to Lancelot and swung to attack. But the next second, one of the monsters flew out of the window from the captain's attack, and he said, "Only a few third-level lizards. It seems they are underestimated." After that, several explosions occurred in the village. The mage attacking the monster shouted, "They must receive, small creatures." His comrade, also attacking the monster, shouted, "This is too easy. Soon they will go back to sleep." Then one of them looked to the side and shouted, "Orcs!" Fourth-level monsters appeared. One of the monsters, swinging a club, ran to attack and hit the mage on the back. After that, a fire attack flew into the monster's face. Lancelot was standing nearby, who concentrated energy in his hand. He asked, "Where are the other monsters?" His subordinates thanked him. He should wait and look over there. "It's a level 6 monster, an orc lord." The mage thought in fear, they, mere fighters, have no chance against a level 6 monster. Then he shouted, "Everything will be fine. The captain is with them." The flawless Lancelot. The next second, the captain pushed off the ground and, rising above the monster, concentrated energy in his hands, then directed a combination attack at the monster, leaving only a hole from the explosion in the ground. After that, he landed, and his subordinates happily shouted, "The captain is incredible. Captain Lancelot." He thought that they are very well organized. They must be led by someone. Monsters like the Orc Lord, although strong, do not have enough intelligence. Then he looked ahead and asked, "What is this?" Meanwhile, the protagonist's team walked through the cave, and MC, running forward, shouted, "Here they are." They proceeded to free the villagers. Therese said, "Everything will be fine now." Clara, untying the girls' hands, said that they can relax. After that, the protagonist ran forward and shouted for them to take care of the rest. Looking at him, Sven shouted for him to wait. At that moment, a monster appeared in front of Lancelot, who asked what was wrong. Were they frozen like a statue in front of Barbarossa's greatness? One of the magicians, holding his injured hand, said, "What a frightening power. It must be the 7th level. No, maybe even the 8th. His comrade said that it doesn't matter. There is no way the captain could lose. After that, Barbarossa swung his weapon and shouted, "Come on. Is this the full strength of the captain of the 1st squad of the Royal Magic Corps?" Lancelot, looking at the monster, thought, he used a lot of strength in the past battle. Now he can only use his special magic one more time. If he misses, everything will be over. What should he do? His subordinates shouted, "The captain is invincible. Even such a giant will be easily swept away. Lancelot thought, yes, that's right. He is the flawless Lancelot. He will not lose to anyone. He was torn from his thoughts by an attack heading towards him. He fell to the ground, raising clouds of dust in the air. The mages screamed in fear. Captain Barbarossa ran to attack, swinging his huge axe, and shouted, "This is the end." The next second, his axe stopped, crashing into the barrier of the protagonist, who noticed that he was in time. The others shouted in surprise, "He stopped this giant axe? How did he do it?" After that, the protagonist extended his hand to the captain and offered to heal him. Is he okay with it? After that, he sent particles of barrier magic at the captain. Lancelot, looking at his hand, asked, "Is this holy magic? Can he use more than just barrier magic?" The protagonist sat down in front of him and explained that it was simply a healing type barrier magic, and this one used the properties of purification and detection to revive the body and stimulate regeneration. At this point, Barbarossa shouted in irritation, "They have the audacity to talk in front of him? Damn them." After that, he repeated his strike on the barrier, and MC, taking Lancelot's hand, asked what about his reserves. He answered that if he used special magic, he could finish him off, but he needed time to prepare. Besides, if he didn't open up, it might not be enough. The protagonist looked at the monster and said that in that case, he would help with it. The captain asked, is he going to continue covering him with the barrier? But he sees that he is going to use magic. MC looked at him and said that it is not so. He will tie him up in battle. Lancelot, perplexed, shouted, how is he going to fight the protective magic of barriers? The next second, the protagonist concentrated the particles in his hands, then directed it to his feet and ran to attack with lightning speed, surrounding himself with a magical barrier. Barbarossa looked at him in surprise, and then flew to the side, crashing into the ground from a strong blow. Those watching what was happening screamed in surprise. He knocked the giant off his feet. Barbarossa, rising up, shouted, they must be damned. They ants have become completely insolent. After that, MC created a barrier that enveloped his fist, and struck, hitting the monster right on the head. Then he turned around and shouted, now! Lancelot concentrated energy in his hands. The others screamed, this is the captain's special magic. The next second, a stream of powerful energy fell on the monster. Barbarossa's body was exposed. The magicians shouted joyfully, he did it! He defeated the giant, as expected of the captain. At that moment, Lancelot said with his last strength, they did it. After that, he began to fall, but the protagonist ran up to him and supported him by the hand. After that, he said that it was amazing magic. Lancelot looked at him and said, he can say the same about his magic. Then the magician ran up to him and, pushing the protagonist aside, shouted, Captain, he is incredible. His comrade added, this is the best magic he has seen. Hey, newbie. Even if he hadn't interfered, the captain would have easily won, and he wanted to steal all the glory for himself. He only got in the way, and then the captain waved his hand and said, enough, if it weren't for him. The next second, the protagonist said, that's right. The captain could have won without him. But Captain Lancelot is also a human. He is not perfect. No matter how he is still a human. If they are comrades, shouldn't they fight together and support each other? After that, a magician grabbed him by the cape and indignantly shouted, is he trying to make a fool of the captain? In response, MC grabbed his hand and said that he knows very well how difficult it is to fight alone, and how convenient it is when someone fights next to you. There are no perfect people in the world. He is also a man of blood and flesh. The man pulled his hand away and told him to let go, and then the protagonist sighed and walked on. After that, the kidnapped people safely returned to the village. The village headman admitted that he was intimidated and sincerely apologized. Who exactly the giant who called himself Barbarossa was remained unknown. The situation was resolved, despite the ominous shadow hovering nearby. After some time, Sen clenched his fists and happily said, finally they returned. Therese added, thank goodness, she was so tired. Clara said, she didn't want to go on the expedition anymore. Then the captain came up to them and asked, do you have a minute to spare? After a while, Lancelot, sitting at the bar, looked at the protagonist and apologized for being so sudden. Was he interrupting? The MC raised his hand and replied that it was not like that at all. This was the first time someone had invited him to the tavern, so he was actually glad. The captain said that he was too. It was his first time inviting someone for a drink. Lancelot smiled and said, so they were in the same boat. He replied, it seemed so, Captain. He said, they were off duty, so he could address them more simply. He should just call him by his name. The protagonist replied that in that case he should just call him Blake. He agreed and asked, well, shall they raise a toast, Blake? They took their mugs in their hands. The protagonist said, like two people in the same boat. Lancelot added, like two imperfect people, to the bottom. After that, they clinked glasses and continued the evening. After some time, MC walked along a busy street. He stretched his arms and thought, he hadn't had a whole day of rest for a long time. Perhaps it would be nice to walk around the city alone sometimes. A lot had happened lately. At some point he himself did not know what would happen next. Thanks to the hero Alice, he had his current life. He walked forward and thought he should thank her somehow. At that moment, Alice, hiding behind the hood, crashed into him and stopped, turning to him. The main character apologized to her, and she said that she was very sorry. After that, he looked at her and asked, is she hurt? And she was not. Before he could finish speaking, she grabbed his hand and running forward shouted after her. The knights followed them. One of them asked, did he find her? His partner shouted that she was nowhere to be found. He asked where she could have gone. He ordered them to search. She was probably still around somewhere. At that moment, MC and Alice hid around the corner of the house. She pointed her finger at him and apologized for dragging him into this. They were just so annoying. He smiled and said, "So it really was her." She sat up, took off her hood and smiled, looking at him. She winked and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Blake? She had heard about his achievements. He awkwardly scratched the back of his head, said, "Yes, he didn't do anything wrong, and more importantly, why was he following her?" She said, "But can he see?" She ran away from work. With these words, she put her hand on her chest, and then she added, "Preparations for the celebration of the victory over the Demon King, meetings and all that. And she is forced to participate in other events. She has to meet with hundreds of important people." And then there was paperwork, answering fan letters. The protagonist noticed that it sounded harsh. She screamed. That was putting it mildly. She grabbed her head and added, Eda and the others were also stressed out, but they had much less work than she did. It was the work that was killing her. They wanted her to get tired to death. Then she gave him a thumbs up, and licking her lips, added, "That's why she ran away, and who cares what happens?" He thought, it looks like she needs a distraction. After that, he asked, "Alice, how about going for a walk together?" She folded her arms across her chest and asked in surprise, "Is it possible?" He smiled and answered, of course, she had done so much for him, and he would like to thank her properly. What would she say? She looked at him embarrassedly, and then clenched her fists, and smiling, answered, with joy. After some time, they came to a clearing, in the center of which stood a lonely tree. The protagonist smiled and said that he didn't know there was such a place near the capital. Alice put her hands on her waist and laughed a little, saying that it was her favorite place. She sometimes comes here when she wants to be alone. He asked if it was okay that he intruded. She raised her index finger and said that it was okay. He can, Blake. She then reached into her bag and said, "Now it's time for a picnic." With that, she took out 2 lunchboxes, and MC said, "Wow, that's great." They sat down near a tree and he looked at the sandwich in the lunchbox. She laughed a little, sat down next to him and said that she made it herself. He asked why 2 servings. She said that it didn't matter. He had to eat. The protagonist then took a small bite and said that he would try it, and then, after chewing the dish, he said, "Delicious." He looked at Alice and said that she was a good cook. In response, she laughed awkwardly and said, "Maybe you wouldn't know it, but she was quite homely." Strange, right? For a hero, she meant. He replied, in his opinion, it wasn't strange at all. She lowered her gaze and said, did he know, before becoming a hero, she was an ordinary girl from a small village. An ordinary girl, quite skilled in housework. She didn't have any special powers, but one day, a revelation came to her. She received the blessing of the goddess Altria. From that day on, she became a hero. Like all heroes who received the blessing, she had to go fight the Demon King. She had to go through harsh training. She looked at her hand and added, before that, she had never even held a sword in her hands, so her palms quickly became calloused and rough. He said, I understand. After that, she stood up and added, but does he know? She was pretty good. When she tried it, fencing was really fun. She quickly became strong. And then she turned around and smiled and said, maybe she had a talent for it. He said, of course. He thought that, to become that strong, you need a natural predisposition. She clenched her fists and asked, really? And then she looked up at the sky and spread her arms out to the side and said, and yet it was really hard. Hard training, powerful opponents, and she only had a few allies. But she tried her best and finally managed to defeat the Demon King. There were far fewer monsters, and most importantly, the threat was gone. Peace is great. Now everyone can smile. Well, although she is still a hero, then she looked at the protagonist who stood next to her in surprise. He said that he was just a barrier mage. He had been doing nothing else for 30 years. An old man who knows nothing about the world, and was discarded as unnecessary. She wondered, what was he doing all of a sudden? What kind of self-deprecation is this? He replied, even someone like him has conviction, and he thinks there are things that only he can do. He wants to protect Alice. The reason he kept maintaining the barrier around the demon realm was because he wanted to protect everyone, and that included her. She asked sheepishly, he knows she's a hero, right? The strongest of humans? He still says he wants to protect her? He replied, whether she's a hero or not, it doesn't matter. Alice is Alice. To him, she's kind, cheerful, and diligent, a caring and wonderful girl. She said, I see. He says such nice things. She smiled and thanked him. She's okay. She was just a little upset, that's all. He said, okay. After a while, they returned to the busy street, and Alice said, that's enough. She's grateful to him for this day. After that, she ran to the arch, and the main character waved and said that if she wanted, they could repeat it sometime. She turned around and waved at him, agreeing. She wanted that too. See you later. At that moment, Gunther was watching them from around the corner. His face twisted in anger. He kept saying, he must die. Gunther asked what he said. Philip folded his hands in front of him and said, he said that he was being transferred to the Mabel district. Gunther approached him and shouted, this is a demotion. What is he even thinking? He replied, he had gone too far. Repeated violation and abuse of authority. And attacking new recruits on top of that. He put his hand to his forehead and said that he can no longer cover for him. Gunther grabbed his cape and shouted, but he is a high-born aristocrat and an excellent mage. Philip pushed his hand away and said that it no longer matters. He is cutting all ties. Gunther continued to shout, angry. After everything he has done for him, he is betraying him like this? Philip straightened his clothes and looked at him and said that it had been a mistake to deal with him. He hadn't thought he would be such a cretin. He would have to start over in the borderlands now. Then the door slammed behind him and Gunther reached out to the closed door and shouted for him to wait. They were going to get rid of him? He kicked the floor and shouted, "Damn it." After a while he walked out of the office. The other mages looked after him in surprise. They were whispering, demoted. Of course it was ridiculous how much he had taken on. A fitting end for someone they despised. Gunther looked at them and shouted for them to shut up, worthless freaks. Then he concentrated a raging energy around himself. After a while, one of the instructors pointed at him and said that he was expelled from the Corps of Royal Mages. Gunther put his hand to his chest and shouted for him to stop making fun of him. He was a high-born aristocrat. Did he know that? He replied, he should have been thrown into prison. He should be grateful that he was only fired. He knelt down and said, how could they treat him like this? He is vital to this country. After that, the gates closed in front of him. He lowered his gaze and said, that's right, Lady Hero must understand his value. He thought it was love at first sight. He wanted to fight by her side, so he aimed to get the captain's position. That is, he thought that she would notice his charm. But then he appeared. He gritted his teeth and thought that he was the root of all evil. After that, he stood up and said, where is he? Where is he? He walked forward until he saw Alice smiling. He smiled and said, Lady Alice, and then his eyes widened in surprise when he saw the protagonist standing in front of her. He thought, why? It should have been him in his place. He imagined himself standing next to her, but the next second his fantasy shattered into small pieces, and he said irritably, he must die. That's right. This is it. He will finish him off and take Miss Alice. Miss Alice? No, it's just Alice. He opened his mouth wide and shouted, she was his from the start. After a while, one of the instructors shouted, everyone line up. Sven, looking around, noticed that everyone had gathered. Therese clenched her fist, said, so many people. Lancelot said that they will be guarding the city and important people during the upcoming ceremony to celebrate the victory over the Demon King. Now he will announce the assignment. So, the squad in charge of the main gate. Therese, looking at the protagonist, asked where he thought they would be placed. He thought about it, and then suggested, maybe the castle gate? After all, they are still newbies. Lancelot said, accompanying the hero's lady and her group will be. Clara said that she thought they would be sent to patrol the streets. Sven sighed and said, most likely. After that, Lancelot looked at the mages and said, that's all. Sven looked ahead in surprise, while the other mages turned to them. He asked, what are they all staring at? Clara said, it's them. Therese looked at her in surprise, and she said, they are the ones assigned to accompany the hero's group. Sven shouted in surprise, what? The students turned around and the boy asked, are the newcomers accompanying the hero and her group? The girl frowned and said, there must be some mistake here. Lancelot replied, that was the wish of the hero herself. They showed themselves well during the recent monster attack. Blake defeated Lord Gunther, and he is also trusted by Alice and Edda. The student said, well, yes, this guy is strong. The boy said, he is strong enough to fight next to the captain. Lancelot raised his hand and shouted, the decision is final. He ordered to begin their duties. All the students screamed, yes, sir. After a while, Sven said, so this is the hero's room. He grabbed his face and said in fear, he is so nervous that he is afraid he is going to throw up. Therese ordered him to pull himself together. Clara said, how disgusting. Sven looked at the girls shaking legs and said, yes, they are too. MC smiled looking at them all. Sven said they have no choice. They have to come in. He pulled the door handles and said, sorry. Alice and Edda were standing near the door smiling. Alice said, there they are. Edda said they were waiting for them. The students widened their eyes in surprise and were a little embarrassed seeing them. Sven thought they were the real Mrs. Hero and Mrs. Edda. Therese thought they were amazing. Clara thought they were like goddesses. Blake apologized for keeping them waiting. The students looked at him in surprise, and Alice smiled and said she heard they did a good job fighting the monsters. Edda winked at him and said, as expected of Blake. Sven said, so they really know each other. Therese asked if she thought they were pretty close. After a while, they were sitting opposite each other, and Alice asked them not to be so nervous. Edda added that they wouldn't eat them. Therese thought, they seemed kind, but how scary. Blake asked how he knew. Was it them who recommended them? Alice answered happily, of course. Edda spoke up, she knew their abilities well. Anna said, she was glad they were here. Clara looked around and thought, such amazing people respect their old man. As she thought, he is not an ordinary person. Sven thought that he understood how cool the old man was, but Clara thought, she had no idea that he was so incredible. Blake sat quietly and thought about nothing, when suddenly William leaned over to Alice and asked, can he make an offer? Alice asked again. What? William answered, although Sir Blake is really talented, what about the other three? Judging by their auras, they are not very strong. No matter how he looks at them, they look like ordinary beginners. The students widened their eyes in surprise when they heard these words. William put his hand to his chest and asked, so wouldn't it be better to replace them with experienced magicians? Therese looked down and thought, he's right, they're no use. Clara looked around and thought, but she looked at MC's satisfied face and asked to let them do it. Sven stood up and shouted, they can do it. Therese supported and said, they don't even know what they are capable of. William exhaled in displeasure and asked, so maybe we should test them? He said the rules are simple. If they can make a successful attack, the victory is theirs. He won't use magic. In his opinion, it's a good handicap. Sven said displeasedly. He looks down on them. Therese clenched her fist and said, it pisses her off. They ordered not to make such faces and, releasing their mana, rushed towards William. After a while they were lying on the floor and William was asking, is it over yet? Sven sat up and thought, he dodged all their magic. William said, they were trained by Mrs. Wahlberga. There's no way they can lose to mages. Alice stood to the side with her arms folded. She thought, the vanguard of a heroes group. Wahlberga, the saint of the sword, a genius swordsman. Etta thought, she is quite good at fighting mages. She thinks there's no chance here. William said, he cannot trust the hero's escort to powerless incompetence. MC approached Alice and asked, how many days are left until the ceremony? Alice answered, exactly 3 weeks. He looked after William and asked, if by then they become stronger, will he acknowledge them? William turned around and answered, okay. They will have another test 3 days before the ceremony. Blake approached his friends and said, this is what he said. What will they do? The students screamed, they can do it. They won't give up. They can do it. Alice said, good luck to them. Etta said they were rooting for them. The mages screamed happily, yes. William turned around and thought, what can you achieve in just 3 weeks? He'll be interested to see. Sven screamed, they'll do their best. Therese screamed, they can handle any training. After a while, in the mecha forest, the mages were running away from huge monsters. Sven screamed in fear. He didn't want to die. Therese turned around and screamed. There was no way they could beat the 3rd level. Clara said, strategic retreat. MC stood on the magic shield and asked them to try harder. Sven looked at him and screamed, it's impossible. He's telling him. Blake put his hands to his face and screamed, they won't get stronger by running away. Sven screamed, enough already. There's no need for all this. He turned around and attacked the monsters with fire mana. The monster aimed an attack at him and Sven jumped to the side. He screamed. It almost hit. Therese looked at the monster and asked, this isn't very effective, is it? Sven asked. What should they do then? MC replied, they need to figure it out for themselves. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. Sven said, even if he says so. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared behind him, opening its toothy mouth. Blake sent mana towards it and said, if anything, it will cover them. So let them fight without fear. Therese screamed happily, they need to prepare. Sven looked at her and asked, yes, but how should they do it? Clara frowned and asked, do they remember what the old man said? MC said a while ago, he can't teach them magic. He himself only knows barriers. Of course, he knows the basic exercises, but Sven interrupted him and screamed loudly, so what should they do? Blake told them to use the cards in their hands. After a while, the students turned around and Sven shouted, he got it. Therese said, that's what he was talking about. Clara spread her arms out to the sides and said, physical ability boost. The monster swung his spear and Therese dodged and said, the creature can't reach her. Sven released fire energy towards the monster, and Therese ordered him not to get distracted. She cut the monster into many pieces, and Sven cried out happily. They did it. Therese suggested to continue. MC looked at them with joy and thought, teamwork multiplies their strength, and if team members get along well with each other, it will give even more strength. On the 2nd day, the students were climbing a mountain, and they had stones tied to their backs. Blake turned around and said, strength and endurance, these are the basics of battle. On the 3rd day, he said to read the opponent's movements and understand your capabilities. The days passed very quickly, and finally, 3 days before the ceremony, William said that they would begin repeat tests. Sven shouted happily, they are not the same as before. Therese said, they will not lose this time. Clara added calmly, they will win. William looked at them and thought, impressive confidence. Was it Blake who encouraged them so much? But there is no point in confidence if there is nothing to back it up. They will know reality soon. Sven looked at William and shouted, they will attack first. William reflected his attack and said that it is useless. Therese created a stream of mana and said, and it is not useless at all. Her attack flew past William, who replied, no, still useless. He reflected the attack again, and William thought he was sure it would hit. So they improved their physical abilities. This is not bad teamwork. The mages attacked him, and he quickly reflected it. They said, as expected, he is strong. William shouted, is that all? Sven shouted, they will do it. Therese said there was no other choice. Clara said, all or nothing. They rushed towards William and stood on 3 sides. Sven screamed, it's theirs. Therese screamed, new. Clara said, magic. 3 magical energies were directed towards William, who widened his eyes in fear and thought, average level? He swung his sword and screamed, horror. He jumped to the side, barely managing to dodge the attack. Sven said sadly, damn, he dodged. Alice screamed, it's over. Sven looked at his hands and said, they used all their magical powers. Therese grabbed her shoulder and said, it looks like they lost. Clara said, this is disappointing. MC smiled and said, they have become so much stronger in just 3 weeks. They should be proud of it. Suddenly, William came up to them and said they passed. Sven asked in surprise, despite the fact that they lost? William replied, it was impressive magic. They had become much stronger in 3 weeks. He knelt down in front of them and said with a smile on his face, he was sure they wouldn't let him down. Blake stretched out his hands to the mages and shouted his congratulations. They jumped up from the floor in joy and Sven shouted, they did it. Therese said, their efforts paid off. Clara said she was glad. Alice smiled and said, they look like a teacher and students. Etta said, what a good relationship. Alice said, Blake's team was saved just before the ceremony. Etta said there were some disturbing rumors. She hoped everything would go smoothly. On the day of the celebration of the victory over the Demon King, a carriage was riding down the street of the city. Someone shouted, it's the heroes group. Sven walked next to them and said, What a huge crowd. Therese said, they need to diligently keep watch so that no one gets hurt. Clara said, they can't relax. MC was riding in the carriage and was thinking, 2 more of Alice's comrades are in the dragon carriage behind. He hoped they are okay. Alice invited Blake to chat, and Etta said that she agreed. MC put his palms in front of him and said, but for now they need to focus on work. Alice stretched and answered in a drawling voice, okay. Blake thought about it. They can't afford to make a mistake. He remembered William's words, that the lives of the hero and her comrades were in danger. There have been multiple assassination attempts and kidnapping attempts, and they are extremely important to the kingdom. They must protect them even at the cost of their lives. MC looked around and thought, they need to be more vigilant than usual. In the crowd stood Gunther, who suddenly howled and said, this useless piece of trash. He rushed forward when suddenly he was ordered to stop. MC turned around and thought, is that Gunther? The knights were given the order to take him. No mercy if he resists. Gunther looked absolutely mad and said, Alice is him. He will kill Blake. The knight ordered him not to move. Gunther charged at him and ordered him to get out. You idiot. There was a loud explosion and then a long scream. The people got scared and screamed, we need to run. It's a mage. Gunther covered himself in fire mana, and Etta activated her ice magic. Sven rushed towards the villain and screamed, idiot! He pounced on Gunther, and Therese grabbed his body. Gunther ordered them to go away. The stupid hillbillies. They threw him to the ground, and he screamed, let them be damned. Let them be damned. If she does not want to be his, then let no one have her. He sent a huge stream of fire towards Alice and ordered her to die. She stared in fear, when suddenly MC appeared in front of her and activated the barrier. Gunther screamed, him again, the terrible barrier mage. Blake approached Gunther, and Alice sadly asked why he did this. Gunther ordered her not to let him deceive her. He ordered Alice to come back to him. He offered to talk about love, like that day when they confessed their feelings to each other. Alice asked, puzzled, what was he talking about? They hardly talked at all. Gunther kept screaming, but they loved each other so much. The knights dragged him away from the square, and Gunther kept screaming and demanding that she give him her love again. Etta asked, is he even unable to distinguish between fantasy and reality? What a pathetic guy he is. Alice looked at Blake with confusion and screamed. She had never dated anyone. She didn't have time for that. MC looked at her with confusion, and Etta looked at the scared faces of the townspeople. She pulled her sleeve and said, Alice. She turned around and screamed, the attacker has been arrested. Etta said that everyone can relax. The townspeople spoke up. Everything seemed to be fine. As expected of a hero and her escorts, bright confetti flew over the town, and Alice spoke up. She was glad they asked for an escort. Etta said that she felt calmer when Blake was around. MC smiled and said that he just covered them with a barrier. Alice asked again, and they are skilled too, right? Blake looked at the students and said, well, the people around them, and they themselves consider themselves young and incompetent, but he thinks they are good. They just haven't realized it yet. Sven screamed happily, awesome. Therese looked at him and said, stop shouting so loudly. Clara said that it embarrassed her. Sven asked embarrassedly, what's wrong with being happy? They are at a ceremony to celebrate the heroes group's victory over the Demon King. MC put his hand on his shoulder and said, yes, and they invited them here. Sven said, that's right. The others present turned around and looked at them with displeasure. Therese said shyly, they are attracting a lot of attention. Sven frowned and said, well, they stand out. Alice suddenly came up to them and asked, so are they enjoying the party? They turned around and widened their eyes in surprise when they saw Alice and Etta's beautiful outfits. Everyone present also praised them, saying, they are so beautiful. They are really beautiful. MC said, they both look wonderful. It's amazing. Alice asked embarrassedly, really? Etta thanked him embarrassedly. Suddenly, Lancelot came up to Blake and said, it looks like he did a good job today. MC smiled and said, Sven and the others did much more than him. Lancelot asked in surprise, really? Sven scratched his nose and said, well, yeah. Therese winked at him and said, he's too modest. Clara said, Sven gets smug so quickly. MC looked at her and said, Clara, she's doing well too. She looked at Therese and said, she's praising her too much. Alice asked in surprise, when did he get so close to Lancelot? Etta said, they were an unexpected couple. Lancelot and Blake exchanged glances after these words. The guests looked at the magicians and asked, who are these people? Some kind of unsightly. They say they are the hero's escort, but don't they look out of place here? MC glanced at them out of the corner of his eye and thought, somehow he feels uncomfortable. He turned around and asked, by the way, where are the other two? Alice asked again, is he talking about Val and Ruagermina? Etta drank the contents of her cup and answered, Walburga is not participating, and Hermina was surrounded by fans and taken somewhere. MC smiled and answered, I see. He wanted to say hello to them. Alice said, sooner or later he would meet them. The musicians were playing pleasant music, and the couples were dancing. Alice came up to Blake and asked him to dance. She pulled him along, and he answered, but he had never danced before. Alice said that everything would be fine. She would lead, and he needed to adjust. They began to whirl in a dance, approaching each other. Clara and Etta looked at this with displeasure, and Therese was in great delight. Sven quickly gobbled up the food. This could not but please him. Suddenly Suddenly MC came up to Etta and held out his palm. He asked, would she give him the next dance? Etta cried out happily, yes. They began to dance in circles, and Lancelot watched with a smile. Alice went up to him and said, so he can smile too. Lancelot replied that he was surprised himself. It seemed that meeting him had changed him. Blake was quite mysterious. Alice replied, yes, she understood. She thought he was a special person. Everyone was affected by him, for better or for worse. Lancelot asked again, she meant Lord Gunther? He was pathetic. Alice asked, by the way, what would happen to him? Lancelot replied, most likely he would be executed. Alice imagined Gunther behind bars and said, I see. Lancelot looked at her thoughtful face and said, he had gone too far with his obsession. She had nothing to do with it. Alice smiled and said, yes, thank you. A few days later, the students and heroes gathered at the gate. MC looked at them and asked, the ceremony just ended and they are already being sent to another country? That's harsh. Alice fixed her hair and said, well, that's the fate of the hero and the group. They have to report to everyone about defeating the Demon King and all that. Etta said, and also, it's a demonstration of their kingdom's power. She'd rather do research. Blake asked them to take care of themselves, and Alice asked him to keep an eye on things here. MC said, surprised, okay. He walked up to Etta and she whispered in his ear that when she came back, she would need his help again. Blake smiled and ruffled her hair and said sure. They got into the carriage and started to drive away, then looked out and shouted, they're leaving. MC put his hands to his face and shouted, have a nice trip. Sven said a little sadly, they left. Therese said, yes. Lancelot said, the heroes group left the capital for the first time, since the Demon King was defeated. He hopes nothing bad will happen. At this time Gunther stood behind the bars and smirked. A week passed since the hero left. Time passed without incident. Gunther continued to sit behind the dark bars. A few more weeks passed. The mages were training, when suddenly the teacher shouted, the training is over. Therese said, she is exhausted. Clara said, she is at her limit. MC smiled and said, good job. Sven said, nothing but training day after day. Do they have no tasks? Therese said, she supposes this means that the country is at peace. Clara said, that is good. Sven cried out happily. They have become much stronger. He wants a real job. Blake looked at him with displeasure, and Sven asked, old man, are you angry? He asked to forgive him for getting carried away. MC said, approaching. Suddenly, a knight ran into the training ground and shouted, dark aura! A massive wave of dark aura is coming. Sven frowned and shouted, dark aura? Lancelot and MC frowned in displeasure and looked towards the knight. They activated their mana and headed into the air. Lancelot looked ahead and said, what kind of horror is this? The townspeople looked around in fear and shouted, dark aura! They need to run! A girl ran down the street holding her child's hand. Suddenly, the baby fell down and started screaming. The girl pulled the baby close and closed her eyes. The dark aura approached them, when suddenly a barrier appeared around them. A huge dome appeared over the city, and Lancelot asked, is the dark aura dissipating? Blake continued to hold the barrier and spoke. He set up a barrier around the capital. This should protect against the dark aura. Lancelot said happily, as expected of him. Blake, he saved everyone again. How long can he maintain the barrier? MC asked thoughtfully. Well, a few months? Lancelot spoke. A few months. Yes. MC looked at him and said, but he couldn't use the accumulation magic circle, and there was no time to implement the formula for a large area either. Suddenly explosions started happening on the streets of the city, which attracted the attention of the guys. Magicians walked down the street and struck, ordering to kill everyone. They shouted, kill everyone. Lancelot widened his eyes and asked, is this an attack? He ordered Blake to hold the barrier. The rest of the squads dispersed to their designated places. MC thought, for an invasion? Or is it a rebellion? Sven screamed, damn, what the hell is going on? The girl was running away from the mage and screaming loudly, and Lancelot attacked the attacker. He ordered everyone to focus on protecting civilians. The mage swung a fire attack, and the girl created an ice stream. Sven screamed, evacuation. Clara saw a small boy and said, over here. A scream was heard. These are the royal mages. Kill them. Sven and Therese dodged the mage's attack and he screamed. They almost got him. Sven ordered not to dare dodge. Idiots. Therese dodged and screamed, as if such an attack could hit them. Clara activated her mana and said, enhancement. Sven swung and ordered to receive. A loud scream was heard, and Therese happily said, but compared to the old man's training, this is easy peasy. Clara stood behind and thought, did she really think she was going to die there? The students were surrounded by opponents and Sven screamed, how many of them are there? Therese said, it looks like they have no choice, they will have to fight. Sven, Therese and Clara were striking at the attacking mages, and a little boy was walking down the street and crying. Clara saw that the bandit was sending a fiery stream of mana in his direction, and rushed to run towards the little boy. She covered him with her body, which made Therese scream loudly. There was a very bright explosion, after which Sven's eyes widened in fear and said, it can't be. Clara hugged the boy, and a barrier was formed above her. The students were happy to see this, and every citizen was covered by a barrier. The man looked around in confusion and asked, what's going on? Lancelot looked at this and said, everyone is protected by barriers. Just don't tell me it's Blake. He looked up at MC and shouted, did he set up barriers around every citizen? Therese directed her mana towards the mage and shouted, what did he do to Clara? The enemy shouted loudly, and Therese rushed to Clara and asked, is she okay? Clara hugged the boy and said, the old man's barrier protected them. Therese said, thank God. Sven looked around and asked, but the old man is not nearby, is he? Clara said, probably he can cast magic from afar. Besides, she asked to look. The barriers protect other people too. The townspeople looked at their hands in surprise and asked, what is this? Therese happily asked, Was he able to protect all the residents of the capital? Sven said. If so, then this is just crazy. Clara smiled and thought, as she thought, the old man. Blake really is an amazing person. Lancelot attacked the opponents and said, these are Blake's barriers. He ordered to use it wisely. The magician turned around and shouted, the number of rebels is too great. His Majesty is in danger. Lancelot asked, are there really no free magicians from the core? The magician replied, no, everyone is tied up in battle. Lancelot frowned and thought, if they leave here they will endanger the civilians, and it will take several minutes to get to the palace. He waved his hand and shouted, they will leave the palace to the Knights' Corp. The magician said, but the knights alone cannot cope. Lancelot said, Blake will support them. The magician replied, he understood. He thought, the captain could go to the palace himself. Does this mean that he trusts Blake so much? Lancelot frowned and thought, he relies on him. Blake. The evil mages attacked the knights who were blocking the entrance to the castle. William ordered not to let these bandits enter the palace. The mage smirked and attacked again, hitting the wall above William's head. The mages ran away and screamed, "By idiots!" William ordered them to stop, when suddenly a huge barrier appeared in front of the bandits. They asked, is this also the work of that barrier mage? At that moment, William approached them and struck. He looked up and with a smile on his face thanked Lord Blake. MC was hovering in the sky and continued to create barriers, when suddenly his attention was drawn to streams of mana directed towards him. He created a coil of lightning and was about to attack, when suddenly a huge hand grabbed his leg and pulled him down. Blake got up and Gunther came out to meet him and said, he is safe and sound. MC looked at him displeased and asked, Gunther, is this rebellion? Is it his doing? Gunther screamed loudly. Who is he for him to answer him? How dare he talk to an aristocrat like that? He will finish him off. MC calmly looked at him, and Gunther fell silent and began to breathe heavily. He said, he lost his temper, and an aristocrat should remain a gentleman. Blake asked, shouldn't he be in jail? Gunther said, he still has supporters. MC asked again, supporters? Gunther smiled and said, this empty chatter is meaningless, because he will die here. Blake asked, why does he need all this? Gunther asked puzzledly, why? He pointed his finger at him and screamed, it's all his fault. Trash, worm, idiot. He clenched his jaw and said he was demoted and sent to the border. He even took his beloved Alice, some pathetic barrier mage. He was standing in his way the whole time. It's all his fault. Blake asked again, isn't this just karma? If he acted like a normal man, he wouldn't be in this situation. Gunther got even angrier, and many veins appeared on his face. MC said thoughtfully, besides, Alice said that she didn't care about him at all, and there was nothing between them. Gunther was blushing more and more with anger, and MC ordered him to stop blaming others for his own mistakes. Gunther screamed loudly. He would burn him to ashes. He activated his mana and shouted. No matter how strong he was, it was too much for one person. Keep the barriers in the capital and around the castle, and they were experienced fighters. Finally, he would kill him. Gunther and his assistants attacked MC and ordered him to die. Die, the damned barrier mage. Blake put his hand in front of him and activated the barrier, and Gunther ordered, more. Let them use more magic. The mages approached MC from behind and Gunther ordered them to act. Kill him. Kill. Several mixed magics were directed towards MC and Gunther screamed, let him die. Blake activated his barrier again and the magic shattered it. MC was very surprised and Gunther ordered to attack now. Finish off. The energy stream was directed towards Blake again, and he dodged it and blocked the attack. The mage screamed. Did he block it? Gunther screamed. It doesn't matter. Let them keep attacking. They will bring everything they have down on him and finish him off. MC pushed off the ground and rose into the air. Gunther called him a fool and said that he had nowhere to run. MC created the barrier in the shape of an arrow again and headed for the epicenter of the mana. He landed and Gunther asked, is that it already? He maintains the barrier over the entire capital, so he can't use his full power. He will eventually die because of these stupid citizens. MC said that he is wrong. Thanks to all of them, he can fight. Gunther screamed, stop spouting this righteous nonsense. Hypocrite. He attacked MC and asked, did he dodge? Blake jumped up and charged towards swinging his fists. He sent several mages flying and Gunther screamed, what? He turned around and asked, what the hell? MC stood on his barrier and replied, it's a barrier-based movement technique. Barriers can be used in a variety of different ways. For attack, defense, and healing. Gunther was furious and demanded not to mess with him. How can this magic be so powerful? Barriers are only good for defense, and only holy magic can heal. How can he do this with barriers? This is wrong. MC looked at him thoughtfully and asked, well, did he train hard? Gunther screamed, is he kidding me? Idiot. MC swung his sword and hit the guys behind him. Gunther turned around and widened his eyes in surprise. MC looked at him and said, it's only him left. He moved behind him and asked, why doesn't he give up? Gunther laughed and reached into the inside pocket of his robe. He pulled out a stone and said, he still has a trump card. He threw it into his mouth and swallowed it, and then was covered in bright mana. MC watched his transformation carefully and remained silent. Gunther happily said that with this, he was invincible. He planned to use this alone with Alice. This power would make even a hero submit. MC said that he would not allow him to do that. Gunther activated a huge stream of mana and shouted, stop playing her protector. He's just an old man. A large stream of mana was sent towards Blake, who activated the barrier. His eyes widened in fear, after which a bright explosion occurred.